It's been 2 years since Succession wrapped up its 4th and final season, and ever since it's maintained its reputation as one of the best shows of the last decade. I hopped on the hype train after season 2, and since then it's become one of my favourites for sure. This show managed to take a cast of terrible people and make them a blast to watch, thanks to the hilariously unique dialogue and performances, plus some truly compelling family drama. Over the 4 seasons, Succession told the story of 3 kids fighting for their dad's approval on the grandest scale possible. And to truly appreciate just how great the show was, I'm going to do what I do best: break down all 39 episodes and rank them from worst to best. This ranking may have been my toughest yet, since the quality of Succession is consistently of the highest caliber. I did manage to figure out which episodes are the least good though, and of course which one is the best of the best. I want to remind you all before we start that this is just one man's silly opinion, so if your favourite episode is at the bottom, don't take it too seriously, because it's all just a game. And obviously there will be spoilers galore. So without further ado, this is every Succession episode ranked. Number 39. Lion in the Meadow. So I had to put something at the bottom, and when I started rewatching the show in preparation for this video, I had a feeling this one would take the spot. Lion in the Meadow is one of 3 or 4 episodes that I wouldn't call great. Still good, but definitely less so than the others. And to be honest, I can't really articulate why I'm not so hot on this episode. What's going on is that one of Waystar's major shareholders, Adrian Brody, is concerned about the ongoing conflict between Kendall and Logan, plus the DOJ doing shit. So Logan and Kendall have to go meet with him to smooth things out in case he defects to Team Sandy Stewie. This plotline taking up most of the episode is what drags it down for me, since all the scenes of Logan, Kendall, and Adrian are just painful to watch, in that classic Succession cringe way. Adrian Brody's character mainly exists as a way to get Kendall and Logan into the same scene together, so we can have some juicy barbs between them. And they're good barbs, don't get me wrong, but the Logan-Kendall dynamic feels a bit like they're just treading water without any new developments. The most it does is set up Logan's declining health for the next episode, where it's a major focus, but for it being the first time father and son have been face to face since the end of season 2, it doesn't really pack much of a punch. Adrian Brody's character also isn't the most memorable guy in the world. If he wasn't played by Adrian Brody, I would have completely forgotten he was even in the show. But enough of being a negative Nancy, there's still some funny shit in this episode. Mainly Roman trying to tarnish Kenny's reputation with this guy who they got the number 1 boy's initials tattooed on some time ago. It seems that Roman isn't quite as quick to deface Kendall as Shiv, since Jerry manages to talk him out of releasing the photos. There's also Connor trying to get a job at Waystar to boost his credentials for his Prez campaign, which goes nowhere. A fine episode by all means, but the vibes are just a bit off in my opinion. Number 38. Celebration. The episode that kicks off this grand adventure is pretty good. Like any good first episode, it introduces us to all the major players, shows us how they tick, the central dynamics between all of them, and establishes the tone plus what the show is going to look and sound like. Let's talk about that first, because Succession is pretty unique as far as modern prestige dramas go. For one thing, it's shot on 35mm film, which is pretty much unheard of these days for a TV show unless you've got the HBO bucks, which this show obviously has. Along with that, the entire show is shot in handheld documentary style, which is usually reserved for mockumentary sitcoms, but it works perfectly for this kind of show. For one thing, this series is a lot more comedy than you'd expect, to the point that I'd almost class it as a dramedy like The Bear, and the constant moving camera fits with the chaotic nature of all the characters, both how they talk and how wacky the situations can be. If the show was shot like a Better Call Saul or something like that, it'd still be good, but I think it definitely benefits from the shaky cam style, which is big praise from me because usually I hate that kind of shit. The other thing that makes Succession stand out is of course the soundtrack. Nicholas Britell's work on this show is just outstanding, and he elevates every scene of cars driving or planes landing to grandiose heights. Without his score, this show would still be good, but it's that extra cherry on top of his decadent cake which seals the deal. And the intro theme especially is the stuff of legends. There are opening themes I like more than Succession's, but it's still up there with the best of the best. Now for the episode itself. Logan's birthday is the main thing going on, and the writers use that as a framework to build all these character introductions around. Probably the best character intro is of course Kendall, who we get a great understanding of from his very first scene, and over the course of the episode we see pretty much every facet of him that we'll then see play on loop for the next 38 episodes. You've got cringy Kendall rapping at the start, Delulu Kendall trying to play business with Lawrence, the classic sad face Kendall when Logan is a meanie to him, and my favourite scene of the episode, angry Kendall when he rages in the bathroom. The best part of this scene is after he's got all his fury out and then tries to clean up after himself. Logan also has a pretty interesting intro. In fact, he gets the very first scene of a show, where he pees on the ground. This subtly foreshadows other time where he pees on the ground. Greg's intro sums him up as a big idiot, with copious helpings of cringe humor throughout the episode that made me despise his character the first time I watched the show. It was only a problem I had for the first 2 episodes, since once he and Tom start hanging out it's all good shit, but at the very start I just hated Greg and his antics. Tom and Shiv are introduced with Tom trying to find the right present for Logan, and I just want to quickly mention that while some shows can feel like they're still feeling out who their characters are during the first episode or 2, all of Succession's characters feel fully realized from their very first scenes. We see Tom is always anxious trying to prove himself to Logan, Connor is clueless but means well, and Roman's unique brand of weirdo troller is best shown in this scene of a baseball game, when he offers the kid $1 million if he can hit a home run, and then tearing the check up in front of him. So this episode sounds like a damn good intro to the show, so why is it down here at basically the bottom? Well, like I said at the start, this is a very close list, and the fact that this episode is pretty much entirely just introducing us to the world makes it slightly less engaging on a subsequent watch, compared to once the plot gets going proper a few episodes later. And not to spoil anything, but you're gonna find similar justifications for a few other episodes near the bottom of the totem pole. Speaking of which, let's get a move on, shall we? Number 37. Lifeboats. The 3rd episode of season 1 is where things really start to get moving. With Logan still out of the picture, we go into this one with Kendall as acting CEO and Roman hanging around as COO. Lifeboats is full of juicy Waystar workplace stuff, after we took a break from it to hang out in a hospital last episode. You've got the terribly cringe phone call performance with Kendall and the bank guy, there's Ken's slightly less terrible speech to the workers about his 1,000 lifeboats plan, which immediately backfires, and a whole bunch of iconic comedy bits. The slam dunk for best line rating not just in this episode but maybe the whole series is this bit when Tom finds Greg with poo bags.
Forgive me, but we talking to each other on the poop deck of a majestic schooner? Is the salty brine stinging my weather-beaten face? No? Then why the fuck are you wearing a pair of deck shoes, man?
Oh, yeah, no.
This scene was the one that instantly let me know that Matthew McFadden's performance was going to be something truly special. It's also a perfect example of how the actors' line deliveries really bring the dialogue home. This scene is already very funny if it was just played out normally, but the unique way all the actors say the lines is what makes the show stand out.
Hey, Lucinda, can we figure out where we might put the talented Mr. Greg?
There's also Roman logging onto the computer and being greeted by 5 trillion emails, so he finds something better to do with his time. This episode is also our introduction to the best character of the show, Kendall's lovable assistant Jess Jordan. She doesn't really do much, but it's nice to always have her there. This whole episode is mostly about establishing what the dynamics are at Waystar, and I think it does a great job at that. It's the last of what I would call the introductory episodes, and by the end of this one I feel like we have a pretty firm grasp on who all the characters are, what's going on with the plot, and where things are going to go from there. And as you would expect, each episode from this point on gets exponentially better now that all the intro stuff is out of the way. I also just want to point out that so far I haven't really had any hard-hitting commentary, but with these early episodes I just don't have much to say about them. As the episodes get more interesting, I'll definitely have more to talk about though, so let's keep that ball rolling. Number 36. Show at the factory. This is the closest Succession has to a bottle sort of episode, with pretty much the whole thing taking place inside the hospital after Logan had his incident in episode 1. I think more so than the pilot, this is the one that really establishes who each character is and the dynamics between them. And unlike some other shows where the series is all about how the characters change and evolve, Succession is different in that how we see these characters in this 2nd episode is how they're going to be for the entire show, because these rich kids are incapable of breaking their lifelong habits. There's a lot that mirrors or foreshadows what goes on after Logan's death in season 4, since here we are in a very similar situation where his fate is up in the air. Kendall has to try and convince the siblings that he should run the company in Logan's absence, which is especially hard considering Logan did tell him to get fucked before his stroke. Plus he fired Frank, so all that could be interpreted as him not thinking straight. It's all just a big mess. Eventually we're left with Kendall and Roman as charge as CEO and COO, similar to when Kendall and Roman become interim co-CEOs after Logan's death, with Shiv stuck on the sidelines. There's even lines of dialogue that are repeated verbatim way later.
I love you, man, but you're not a serious person.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
Then you have the real employees of Waystar trying to deal with the PR mess of it all, despite it being a touchy time, and having to maneuver around the siblings getting in the way. Once again, very similar to how things go down when Logan dies for real. The end of the episode has this great bit where Jerry lets Kendall in on the secret that Logan took out a big loan secured against Waystar's stock, which is tech jargon for Waystar is fucked. I also really like what's going on with Greg this episode. He still has a lot of painfully cringe moments, but this is where we start to see the beginnings of his scheming side, as he's put in a situation where both Shiv and Rome want different things from him, and he has to choose his allegiances. He ends up going with Shiv, which doesn't end up benefiting him in any way, but oh well. He's still a bumbling buffoon and will remain that way for a long time, but this episode shows that he does have that instinct to make moves, even if he never accomplishes much more than getting used by other family members. His shenanigans at Logan's apartment are highly amusing as well. Tom is also settling into his new role of harassing Greg 24/7, which will continue to be maybe the best dynamic of most of the series. If you ask me, it starts to get a bit played out by season 3 or 4, but you can always count on these two to bring the heat comedy-wise. But the major thing Tom does this episode is propose to Shiv, at maybe the worst time possible. I guess he was trying to make her feel better while her father's fate was in question, or maybe he just did it without thinking. Either way, she does say yes, so it looks like it was the right move after all. Hopefully it works out in the long run. Really good episode overall. It tells us so much about how all these people act and sets the precedent for what to expect from everyone moving forward. I just love episodes of TV where people argue in a room. What can I say? Number 35. The Summer Palace. Coming off the shocker ending of Season 1, the first episode of Season 2 sets the stage for whom the major players are going to be. Mainly, Shiv has been promoted from a character who was kinda on the sidelines to practically the second main character, after Kendall of course. The whole family gathers at this smelly house to discuss the imminent Sandy Stewie takeover, and most importantly, who's going to step up as the big dog after Logan. He offers the role to Shiv, and despite her seemingly having a head on her shoulders compared to her brothers, she fully buys into the delusion because she, like everyone else, is just that desperate for Daddy Logue's approval. And what could be a bigger stamp of approval than CEO? So that sets up Shiv as one of the mains this season, plus we're introduced to her new haircut, which I used to hate on, but I grew to like it this time around. I do still miss her Season 1 style though. The other big thing going on this season is Kendall's sad boy arc, which if you ask me is the beating heart of the whole season, thanks in no small part to Jeremy Strong's incredible performance, which I will say right now is the best of the series. It's a huge part of what makes Season 2 my favourite of the bunch. This edgeless, dead-eyed version of Kendall is so captivating to watch. The best scene of the episode is when he comes face to face with Roman and Shiv, and they're grilling him about why he switched up. Unfortunately, there's a big lack of Greg in this episode, since they don't take him to the Summer Palace for some reason, but we do get to see a bit of him when Kendall tasks him with getting some coke. Clearly, he has zero intentions of trying to sober up after he got a guy killed. The main thrust of this episode is Logan weighing up whether he should sell the company or not, and everyone's obviously too intimidated by him to make any real arguments for or against. At the end, he decides not to sell, but I do wonder if he ever had any intention of selling at all, and was instead just testing Shiv and Rome and the rest. He tells Shiv that if she doesn't accept the CEO role, he's going to sell, but again, I wonder if he was actually considering making Shiv CEO, or if this was just another move to get her under his thumb, or make her more competitive among her brothers, or he just likes to troll. That also leads into a greater discussion about whether Logan ever planned to make any of the kids his successor, but that's a discussion for another time. So a really solid episode to start off a season, and it only gets better from there. Number 34. What It Takes. This is the episode where the Roy fam goes to this political conference to find a new Republican presidential nominee. The highlight character of this episode, like most of Season 3, is Tom, who's still in full crisis mode as his imminent imprisonment seems to be coming closer and closer. A great scene is this one where he and Greg are trying equivalents to prison food, and Gregory very subtly asks Tom to bear the extra burden of his own misdeeds, since Tom's apparently going to jail anyway. And an even better scene is when Tom and Ken have a secret meeting to discuss Tom joining the fledgling Team Kendall, which gives us this line that summarizes Tom's entire arc this season.
My hunch is that you're going to get fucked. Because I've seen you get fucked a lot. And I've never seen Logan get fucked once.
He's saying it to Kendall here, but it obviously represents his thoughts on all the siblings, which is why he ends up aligning with Logan at the very end of the season. The bit after with the incredible Britell music and him seeing Greg being paraded around is impeccable stuff. You can feel the conflict in Tom as he comes back to this fucked up family that he's going to get locked away for, and that look between him and Shiv says so much. So all that is spectacular, but the meat of the episode is all the politics stuff, which naturally leads to this being a pretty Shiv-centric episode. I think Siobhan is at her best when she gets to fight for her political beliefs, so this episode has some great stuff for her, with her and Roman both trying to push their own ideal candidates for the nominee. The scenes where it's the whole squad in the room debating are the best stuff in the episode, both dramatically and comedically, since Connor is also there trying to pitch himself. This episode sets up a bunch of dominoes which aren't fully knocked over until a full season later, and it's especially rewarding to rewatch knowing what goes down in the election episode. This is our introduction to Jared Menken, who is of course a very important player, but I'm glad he's only in a handful of episodes because his actor really embodies that kind of guy so well, to the point where I really don't want to see him. And he's of course paired with Roman, which results in some very intriguing tension-filled moments in a bathroom. I love the ending of the episode especially, where Shiv doesn't want to be in a photo with Menken, but Logan plays the family card. Sarah Snook's performance in this episode is fantastic as usual. Meanwhile, Team Kendall is very quickly losing steam with his DOJ meeting going less than swimmingly, and then after Lisa finally calls him out on being an idiot, he just fires her.
Lisa's out. Turns out she's a toxic person.
As someone who went into season 3 high off the adrenaline of Kendall's power play against Logan, it felt pretty painful to watch him stumble around and fall on his face like this, even though I really should have expected it considering it's Kendall we're talking about. Stephen Root also shows up in this episode, which is always great to see, but they don't really give him anything exciting to do. Oh well. Number 33. Sad Sack Wasp Trap. This episode is built around the annual Foundation Gala night, where Kendall plans to announce officially that Logan is stepping down from a company. At least that's what he's accused of, but he's adamant that the retirement line on the teleprompter was his cue to make a cringy joke about Logan never retiring. It's not really answered whether Kendall's being truthful here, but I'm inclined to lean his way. Sure, he has a reputation of trying to overthrow his dad, but this early in the show, I don't think he would try to pull a stunt like that. Plus, throughout the episode, we hear about his plan to tell some hilarious jokes. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's reel it back a bit. My favourite stuff in this episode is everything with Tom and Greg, as Tom gets called in by Bill to learn about the many skeletons in the Cruise Division's closet, which includes everything from sexual assault to straight up murder. Once he becomes accessory to all of this, he ropes Greg in to join the fun. There's so many great lines between them as usual.
That's the death pit, Greg. Take a look.
I mean, I feel like I might not like it in the death pit.
Tom wants to go public about the past mishaps, but Jerry finds out thanks to Greg and stops him. More smart moves from the egg, which will only continue to get better next episode. Connor's been put in charge of organising stuff of a gala, and this is where we really understand just how much of a weirdo this guy is. It's like he never grew up past 12 years old, since he acts like a screaming baby over stuff like the butter being too cold, which low-key is a big issue because who likes unspreadable butter? But the way he treats the crew probably isn't quite deserved. The big moment is when Logan takes the stage to announce he's back, both to the characters and to us the viewers. From here on out, Logan's presence will be a constant, and we'll quickly discover just how nasty he can be. Number 32. Return. This episode sees the siblings going to the UK to secure their mum's loyalty. This is one of the best showcases of just how broken Kendall is, thanks to the waiter incident being brought up as ammunition against Logan, who has to go to the victim's family to apologize and whatnot. And I guess just to torture him a bit, he makes Kendall come along too. The scene at the family's house is incredibly depressing, amazing acting from Jeremy as usual, and you can really feel the tremendous weight on Kendall's shoulders. And it gets even worse at the end of the episode, when he tries to talk with his mum about how shit his life is, and she just pisses off. This was the episode that made me realize just how bad Caroline is, just as bad as Logan in fact. Speaking of Logan, there's this one scene with him and Kendall and Roman where he giggles at Romy's joke, which is amusing but also kinda sinister when you think about it. In the last episode, Logan hit Rome while he was mouthing off, and then in this episode he's being uncharacteristically nice to him, even offering the shittiest apology ever. So this laugh probably isn't a rare, genuine moment from him, but just him trying to win back Rome's favor after last episode. And Roman's the most lenient of the siblings when it comes to Logan's bullshit, so he folds pretty quick. Meanwhile, Shiv is spending the whole episode trying to have a one-on-one with Logan to clear things up, but he keeps avoiding her. After a convo with Rhea where she offers Shiv a job at Pierce, Logan confronts her about it and it turns out it was all a test to see if Shiv was really loyal. Bit of a bullshit move by Logs, since he was already giving Shiv a runaround, and it's reasonable she want to keep her options open, but Logan's a bastard, so that's that. But on top of that, it seems Rhea is playing for the CEO position, and the episode ends on this exciting note of Shiv letting Kendall know that the game is afoot. The peak storyline of Tom and Greg with the papers comes to a climax this episode, with Tom strong-arming Greg into revealing them to him so he can get rid of them once and for all. The dialogue between them is hilarious as usual, especially when Tom discovers where Greg is hiding the papers.
Secret, Greg? But not top secret. Interesting. Just secret. That's smart. Just so people know, that these are secret.
They're secret, yeah. But look, the actual envelope says receipts.
Ooh, but they're not, in fact, receipts.
Shut up.
God. Easy.
Sorry.
But Tom's also acting completely serious for once, and when he threatens to break Greg's legs, there's no funny barb afterwards. Thankfully, Greg manages to snag a few papers before they're burned, which I'm sure will become important later. Number 31. Living Plus. Time for our first Season 4 episode. Like the rest of this season, this episode is really good, but it's surrounded by some stiff competition, so I had to go here on the totem pole. Anyways, this episode sees Kendall and the Waystar crew announcing their shiny new product, Living Plus, which is... I don't know what it is. You live in a house and things happen or something. That's not important. What is important is that Kendall has gone off a cliff and is living in a dream world where everything goes his way and no one can say no to him. This episode is probably the closest to how he acts in Season 3 when he gets high off his own hype. It leads to plenty of amusing moments, and overall this episode is more focused on the gags than being earth-shattering, which is fine because Season 4 already has plenty of that. This is the closest Season 4 has to a pretty standard Succession episode, amidst all the drama of Logan's death. While Kendall's planning his epic speech, Roman's going around firing people left and right just because he can. First he fires this chick from the movie studio, and then he fires Jerry when she questions his authority. This episode is definitely the best showcase of what a Waystar led by Ken and Rome looks like, and confirms pretty decisively that while Kendall might be better of a job than Romy, it's clear neither of them are fit for the task at all, even though Kendall's speech actually ends up going pretty well. This is also the first time we see Logan since his untimely demise. In fact, he's the first thing you see when the episode starts. Kendall's got this thing going where he's tasked Greg with making the recording say certain things so he can interact with it on stage. And while it does work, if only he waited a couple more years, and then he could have used AI to make Logan say whatever crap he wanted. Now that I think about it, a major plot point in this episode is basically just Kendall trying to make a YouTube poop. Shiv and Tom are continuing the very weird place they've been in ever since the start of the season, with things heating up a bit after they have a chat during Shiv's crying session. The first time watching this season, I didn't really like Tom and Shiv's extended breakup routine, but this time around it really clicked with me, because of course these two would just keep trying to put up with each other's bullshit, despite betrayal on top of betrayal. After 3 straight seasons of pretty low-key jabs at one another, it's so entertaining to watch these two just be at each other's throats 24/7, especially Tom, who's finally got some fire in him now that it's clear that their marriage is on death's door. The two of them are easily the best part of the majority of this season. Pretty amusing episode, but compared to how incredible the rest of Season 4 is, it doesn't quite stack up. Number 30. Our Jestys. One of many episodes where the Roy fam goes on a trip to a place, this one takes them to Our Jestys, a world conference for a bunch of cool billionaires. There's a lot of really juicy character stuff and some great comedy bits. The bulk of the episode is the Waystar crew trying to navigate the incoming bomb of the crew scandals being exposed to the public, and also trying to secure the Pierce deal. The best stuff is when the 3 siblings take the stage to discuss the controversy, where Shiv and Kendall go back and forth about what the company's response will be, while Roman adds nothing. The bit after where Logan gets mad and knocks Roman is really good, since we get a rare bit of defiance from Kendall against his dad, which ever since the start of this season has been non-existent. All of this plus the comedian roasting them is enough for Nan to bounce from a Pierce deal, so that's the end of that. The actual best plotline is Tom's upcoming speech where he's going to promote ATN with the slogan, "We're listening." It turns out that they really are listening, and this scene and the subsequent ones of him and Greg workshopping a new slogan are some of the funniest bits of the show.
We're listening? It's complicated, but yeah, it seems that we are sometimes listening quite aggressively.
We are listening?
Yeah.
We hear for you, man, because you don't need to hear, we hear.
Yeah, we
also, we hear for you.
It's good because it's not clear exactly what the hell it means. So, lots of wiggle room?
Yes.
The alliance between Rome and Jerry continues to grow, with her vouching for him before the panel and helping him out with this Edward guy. We're also introduced to Hugo, who just kind of shows up, and then from then on he's part of the Waystar crew. The rest of the episode is mostly everyone reacting to all the drama going on, but before we move on, I want to shout out how pretty this episode is. Anytime the show ventures outside of the monochromatic New York City, it always looks so appealing, and everyone gets cool new outfits to wear as well. This building they're in for most of it is also pretty cool looking. Number 29. The Monsters. The first episode of the final season establishes the new status quo around 6 months after season 3, that being the siblings teaming up to try to launch some lame new media company, while Tom and Greg are on Team Logan. This episode marks another birthday for Logan, which, assuming the first season took place in 2018, the year it was released, would mean it's been 2 years since the show began. Another birthday means a bunch of characters in the same place, minus the siblings of course, which leads to more wacky shenanigans concerning Greg's new date and her capacious bag. It was this episode that I started to feel the Disgusting Brothers routine was getting a bit played out, but their scenes are still funny regardless, and once Logan dies, it injects a bit more life into their dynamic. The bit with Greg supposedly recording his sex tape is especially good. Meanwhile, the siblings are still very much against their dad after that whole debacle in Tuscany, and are trying to branch out with their own company known as the 100. Like a lot of fake companies in the show, I have no idea what the 100 is even supposed to be, and it doesn't seem like the sibs really do either. Anyway, it becomes clear that Logan is trying to buy PGM yet again, so the siblings decide to fuck him over and beat him to the punch. The scene where they decide to go for Pierce is really good, and establishes where each sibling's head is at. Kendall wants to fuck over Logan as usual, Shiv wants to fuck over Logan and Tom, since he betrayed her pretty badly, and Roman seems to not want to fuck anyone, like he so eloquently puts it. It's well known at this point that Rome is always the most likely to crawl back to his dad, as we see 1 episode later, so it makes sense that he'd be the most opposed to getting back in the ring with him. This scene also shows that while it is cool to see the siblings working together, it's pretty clear that the only thing keeping them together is hatred for their father, and as soon as they lose that, they'll go flying apart pretty quick. Every bit with Logan in these first 2 episodes hits really hard on rewatch knowing that he's gonna die in 2 days. Particularly the scene where he leaves his birthday bash to hang out with Colin, the one guy in his life who isn't scared of him or hates him. Seeing Logan try to have a one-sided conversation with his doofus is just depressing. The first time I watched this season, I honestly found the first episodes leading up to Logan's death to be kinda underwhelming, but looking back now, I can see how every scene is carefully building up to that fatal moment, and it really gave me a new appreciation for this episode and especially the second one. The rest of the episode sees the siblings and Team Waystar in a bidding war for Pierce, with the Sibs winning a ridiculous $10 billion deal. Although considering Logan was going to pay double that back in season 2, that seems like a bargain. Number 28. Keantashire. The penultimate episode of season 3 sees the fam going on yet another lavish trip to a place. This time it's Italy for Caroline's wedding. It seems Tuscany brings out the love in people, as there's a lot of sexy stuff going on in this episode. For example, Shiv and Tom get it on in bed, and when Tom asks her to talk dirty, she tells him she doesn't love him and she's too good for him. Not exactly the kind of thing you want to hear from a chick you're married to, but she just brushes it off as foreplay stuff. The Tom Shiv stuff throughout this whole season is just kind of depressing, since they never really address their issues after the end of season 2, and this scene is kind of a rock bottom for them. And I'm guessing it's around now that Tom's starting to look for an excuse to jump ship. On a lighter note, now that Greg's managed to pull Dasha Nekrasova, he thinks he's hot shit and immediately sets his eyes on a bigger bounty, that being this princess or duchess or something. I think season 3 as a whole is such a great showcase of how Greg's character has eroded since the first season. He started off as this lovable dork who had kinda good intentions, but after spending so much time with the worst family ever, he's become just as shallow as them. Basically, the shorter Greg's hair, the more corrupt he is. So Kendall's shown up to the wedding with a new look after he pretty much fell apart at his birthday. He's pretty much back in his depression mode from season 2, and he wants a meeting with his dad to just be done with it all. This scene with the two of them is definitely the best of the episode. It's sad to see Kendall so defeated considering he started the season on such a high note. And Logan shows how ruthless he truly is, when he won't even let Kendall take the buyout and dangles the waiter thing in front of him just to rub it in. The moment where he brings out Iverson to test for food in case it's poisoned is especially dark. The ending sees Kendall seeming very dead in a pool, but he's fine, don't worry. Another fun parenting moment is the conversation between Shiv and Caroline, where she says she should never have had children, gaslights Shiv, and just acts like an all-round dickhead. Just another reminder that it's not just Logan ruining these kids. This episode also features one of the most iconic moments of the show, when Rome sends Logan a dick pic. This whole scene is just incredibly hilarious. First off Logan's reaction, then Roman's reaction, then their confrontation after where Rome gets called out for being a sicko. Just an impeccable moment. Although I do have one minor complaint that's always bugged me, which is that the way the pic gets accidentally sent to Logan is not something that can really happen. At least not on iOS, which Rome is using. But I'll accept it as a way to make the scene happen. One last thing I want to mention, which applies to several other episodes, is that this show looks so damn pretty whenever it leaves the cold greyness of New York, like I mentioned back with our Majestic. The color palette of Tuscany is gorgeous, and it helps that everyone's outfits are substantially more radiant, particularly Shiv, who looks fantastic in this episode. So a pretty all over the place episode, doesn't feel quite as focused as others, but I know someone who considers this to be their favourite episode, so let's hear from them real quick.
Chianti Shire, the penultimate episode of Succession's third season, is my pick for favorite episode, and not just so I get a chance to say my favorite word, penultimate. The episode is named after a nickname for the region of Tuscany where the season-ending centerpiece wedding takes place, a portmanteau of Shire, a suffix that denotes a county, and Chianti, that fictional wine that Hannibal Lecter drinks. Tuscany is just another addition to the many gorgeous locales Succession shot on location for, joining the list of scenic landscapes like Herefordshire, Dubrovnik, and Six Flags Great Escape. The episode was sort of a layup for me because it's littered with payoffs to character dynamics that have been building the entire season or even the entire series. Kendall hits the self-destruct button on the season-long crusade against his father, following hitting his own personal self-destruct button at his birthday party the preceding episode. And the tense dinner conversation with Logan, where Logan twists the knife on several of Kendall's pressure points, is also peppered with plenty of foreshadowing for how Kendall will react to his father's death in the following season. Shiv finally drops the "I don't love you" bomb on Tom, and her efforts to play it off as dirty talking foreplay do not successfully dissuade Tom from his upcoming betrayal. And then there's Roman, finally getting the big thumbs up from Poppy he always dreamed of, only to immediately blow up the latest Gojo meeting by accidentally sending a photo of a big something else up to his own dad. If all of the weddings in the show devolving into disaster didn't already tip you off, this series was created by Jesse Armstrong, creator of Peep Show, one of my personal favorites. And this scene in particular, where a character wrecks all of their best laid plans in an incredibly stupid way with the added salt in the wound of sexual humiliation on top, like this is straight out of Peep Show. This and the rocket explosion scene in season 1. How could I not love to squirm in my seat watching it? By the way, do you think that's Kieran Culkin's real cock or did they use a dummy cock? Kieran Culkin, if you're watching this, send a photo of your cock to HN Films. Contact information is in the channel description. And I don't want to hear about anybody getting any funny ideas. Don't just make a burner email that's like KieranCulkin69@gmail.com and then send HN Films a bunch of penises pretending they're his. Only send them your penis if you're Kieran Culkin.
Number 27. Secession. Season 3 kicks off with a bang after the bombshell that was the ending of Season 2. Picking up immediately afterwards, this episode sees Kendall trying to secure a base of operations and build a team of allies as quickly as possible, while Logan and the Waystar crew deal with the fallout from all the shit going on. This is our introduction to manic Season 3 Kendall, riding off the high of his awesome press announcement. I went into this season thinking it was going to be so cool to watch Kendall have a comeback after a straight season of depression, but by the end of the episode, I knew this was going to be short-lived. He clearly hasn't learnt a thing from the last time he tried to kill his dad, whether it be ignoring counsel from others, being a dickhead to people, and everything that comes out of his mouth being useless jargon. It does lead to some pretty funny moments though, and my favourite sequence is him, Greg and Jess in the car as they all do business on their phones, with Greg as the social media guy. My favourite part of this episode and the whole season is Jess being around more. Still not enough obviously, but this episode is easily the most we've heard her talk up to this point. Ken's scenes with Rava in this episode are especially cringe as usual. Kendall probably has access to who knows how many buildings, but I guess he wanted to show off how he's fighting the good fight for the little guy or whatever. Meanwhile, Logan wants to appoint someone as interim CEO, and it seems the three options are Shiv, Rome, and Jerry. Roman immediately gets himself disqualified with this embarrassing phone call where he tries to prop up both himself and Jerry. Shiv, meanwhile, seems to get the shaft because she wasn't able to secure renowned lawyer Lisa Arthur, who it turns out Kendall has already acquired for his own campaign. The episode ends with several characters' allegiances under question. It's Team Kendall or Team Logan, but things probably won't pan out in such a straightforward manner. As far as Succession episodes go, this is one of the most action-packed of the whole series. Things are constantly happening, and it's easy to get swept up in the excitement of Kendall's crusade, which is gonna make that inevitable crash out all the more worse. Just a really fun episode, and sets the stage for the season incredibly well. Number 26. Pre-nuptial. Another penultimate episode that takes us to a wedding, this one being the OG marriage of Shiv and Tom. This episode takes us to England, and is our introduction to Caroline, the mother of the three main siblings. Sorry, Connor. It's immediately obvious that Caroline is just as bad a parent as Logan, but she's really funny, so that makes up for it. Her interactions with Greg and Roman especially are hilarious. Greg's trying to talk like a proper Englishman throughout this episode, which is highly amusing.
I did hear tell.
Oh, God, and your dad used to try and sleep with all the men in Sausalito.
This episode is our proper introduction to Tabitha Hayes, after she gave Tom some head at his bachelor party, and now Roman's brought her as a date for no reason other than to fuck with Tom. Tabitha is one of my favourite side characters, and it's such a shame that she just completely vanished after Season 2. Season 3 was shot during Corona times, plus Caitlin Fitzgerald was pregnant, so it makes sense she wasn't involved then, but I was really hoping Season 4 would bring her back only to be sorely disappointed. It turns out that she was going to return, and even film scenes which we can see in promotional stills and in the original scripts, but she ended up being cut out for some reason. It would have been cool to see her around even as just a friend for Roman, since even though their relationship had some major issues, they did seem to have some genuine chemistry. But enough about that, there's a lot of stuff going on in this episode. Logan has a grand late entrance with the Succession music pumping in the background, basically just aura farming, and his scenes in both this episode and the next are some of my favourites of the whole series. This talk with him and Kendall where he puts on the charm is dripping with understated tension between the two of them, since we know Kendall's plotting another takeover attempt. Shiv and Tom's dynamic really heats up when Tom catches wind of her and Nate being up to some chicanery, and the scene where he confronts her about it is fantastic. The conflict scenes with these two always feel so real, and this is no exception. Shiv does a pretty lame job at trying to assure him that everything's chill, and you can tell Tom doesn't buy it at all, but he's too weak-willed to really do anything about it. Back to the hostile takeover, Sandy and Stewie let Kendall know that D-Day has been moved forward to the day of a wedding, because they've got to make this shit as dramatic as possible. And with all these pieces in play, the end of the episode has this awesome montage of everyone gearing up for the big day, and it left me incredibly keen to see how it would all tie together in the finale. Number 25. I went to market. This episode takes place over Thanksgiving, which of course leads to all sorts of drama. But before that though, Logan seems to be acting a bit weird. First he has a silly idea to buy a bunch of local TV stations which no one seems that keen for, then he overpours his coffee, then he pisses on the floor of Kendall's office. All of this is enough for Kendall to decide that Logan's brain ain't what it used to be, and begins to plot a vote of no confidence against him, with Roman, Frank, and even Jerry's support. So that seems like a slam dunk, but we'll get back to it later. Tom decides he needs to get rid of the cruise documents, and enlists good old Greggy to get the job done. This is the first real instance of Greg's scheming bearing fruit, as he makes copies of all the papers to use as blackmail for later. This was when I knew Greg had the secret source, but to be honest, this is probably the height of him actually being smart in the show. This episode is also where we meet Ewan for the first time, Logan's crotchety brother played wonderfully by James Cromwell. The first scenes with him and Greg are hilarious, while also telling us exactly what kind of guy Ewan is. Also, the fact Greg had to drive 12 hours there and back is insane, let alone the fact that Ewan wouldn't let him play music or podcasts or anything. You'd think a rich guy like Ewan would have a better way of getting places than Greg. But yeah, any scene with Ewan is always a hoot, especially later in the show when he sees how Logan's influence has corrupted Greg. And the bit where Tom calls up Greg while he's on speakerphone is a great bit.
I'm driving my grandpa down for Thanksgiving.
Oh, Greg, fuck your grandpa.
Okay, you're on speakerphone, Tom.
Well, I shouldn't be, Greg.
All the stuff with the family at the apartment is really solid, with the standout being the titular I went to market scene, where Logan gets a bit demented and hits Kendall's son. This adds even more fuel for Kendall's plan against Logan. He tries to recruit Ewan to the cause, but we see that he still has some loyalty to him for some reason, or he just detests Logan kids even more than the man himself. With a show like this, it's kinda hard to go wrong with a big family dinner episode, and this one pulls it off with flying colours. Number 24. Mass in Time of War. This episode keeps that momentum from the season opener going full steam ahead, with all the siblings trying to figure out which side they're on while Logan fucks around. The highlights of this episode are basically every scene at Kendall's base of operations, where one by one the siblings all trickle in to hear his side and weigh their options. First Shivy, then Rome, and finally Connor. So Shiv and Rome are adamant that they're just there on Logan's behalf and don't want anything to do with him, but it's clear they're genuinely considering taking Kendall's side, Shiv especially. Every scene with all of them in the room hashing it out is just spectacular, and while I was still on the Kendall gravy train at this point, this is also where it becomes apparent that he's just gonna end up imploding like before. I really liked getting insight into just how planned Kendall's little PR stunt was. He tells the Sibs that he did speak to a lawyer, but also that it was kinda last minute, which makes me think that he's just making the lawyer thing up and he just decided to do it like 10 seconds before he started talking. Kendall in these first few episodes is so fun to watch, since he technically is fighting for a good cause which makes you want to root for him, but it's obvious he only sees the plights of women and all that as a tool to help take down his dad and nothing more. In a classic example of me being baited by Kendall Hopium again and again, I really felt like he might be able to get the siblings on his team, but as soon as Connor folds, he immediately resorts to lame insults and then it all falls apart. The worst part about all of this is that he yells at Jess.
What?
This was the moment I knew that Kendall was truly irredeemable. There's also still the background thread of Sandy and Stewie with the upcoming shareholder meet, which was a big hype moment near the end of season 1 that kinda died down over the course of the second season. And now here we are in the third season, I kinda just stopped caring about it. So anytime that plotline is the focus during this season, it's probably when I'm the least interested. Until the shareholder meeting itself, which is awesome, but we'll get to that. Marsha's also in this episode, which as far as season 3 and 4 goes is a rare thing. She was one of the main cast members in the first 2 seasons, and then once season 3 rolls around she basically just disappears. I feel like the writers had big plans for Marsha in season 1, but maybe couldn't figure out where to go with her, so they put her on the back burner and then forgot entirely. It's not like her absence ruins the show or anything. In fact, I wasn't really huge on her character to begin with, but it is something that I've noticed on subsequent watches. It seems like there was a pretty noticeable shift between season 1 and 2 in terms of what characters were going to be the major players going forward, and Marsha got lost in the shuffle. Overall, another fantastic episode that keeps up the season 3 momentum, but it won't be much longer before the Kendall hype train goes careening off the rails. Number 23, Tailgate Party. This episode is all about Tom and Shiv's weird back and forth divorce era coming to a climax, and their argument towards the end is one of the best scenes of the season, maybe the whole show. Ever since the end of season 3, I'd been anticipating this confrontation between the two of them more than anything else, and instead of having it happen at the start of the season like I expected, the writers very smartly chose to build up to it throughout most of the season. So we've had this tension between the two of them building and building over not just this season but basically ever since the end of season 1. So when they finally let it all out, it's simply spectacular TV.
Part of a tactical kind of joke.
Will you explain to me, the joke? Because I
my
don't
God.
get the
Tom.
fucking joke.
You betrayed me.
You were going to see me get sent to fucking prison! Shiv!
Obviously, the acting from both Matthew McFadden and Sarah Snook is world class. I knew their Emmys were locked as soon as I saw this episode. Their performances just feel so real. And while I definitely am rooting for Tom over Shiv, both of them have fucked up so much that you can only really feel sorry for them in the end. My only complaint with this scene is that it ends. But that isn't the only scene in this episode. Most of it is built around the pre-election party at Tom and Shiv's joint, where Shiv spends most of her time talking shit about Tom, and he complains about being tired. Pretty much all the major players plus some good side characters show up so we can have plenty of good passive-aggressive encounters, mainly between Matsson and everyone else. This is probably my favourite Matsson episode, since all his interactions with people are hilarious. I especially love his dynamic with Greg, where he's just dismissive of him at first, but ends up kinda liking him. Greg's scenes with Matsson really inject some new life into his character, since I felt his relationship with Tom had pretty much run its course at this point, in terms of funny bits. The part in this episode where Tom makes Greg fire people on Zoom is peak comedy though. The plot development stuff with the Waystar versus Gojo conflict this episode is Ken and Rome finding out Gojo's numbers are bogus, which makes Shiv think she's fucked up by gunning for Team Matsson. It doesn't really end up being an issue, but it does give us this awkward 1v1 between Ken and Lucas, which is mildly amusing. The Kendall and Rome versus Matsson stuff throughout this season isn't the most engaging plot thread by a long shot, but it's a good plot device to generate drama between the characters surrounding it. Mainly the Shiv is a double agent for Matsson angle, which leads to some of the best stuff in the season, plus her dynamic with Matsson is a lot of fun. So a lot of great comedy and drama in this episode, which is exactly what you want out of this show. The Tom and Shiv stuff is an obvious highlight and the rest is pretty good. Number 22, The Disruption. The first 2 episodes of season 3, while still very exciting, were ultimately setting the table in terms of who's on what side, and this episode really kicks off the conflict proper. The main back and forth going on is between Kendall and Shiv, after they left on kinda bad terms previously. After a bit of verbal sparring at this charity dinner, Ken decides to show up uninvited to Waystar and cause a ruckus, which doesn't really accomplish anything. Shiv has this speech she's making to the Waystar crew, but it's rudely interrupted by a bunch of speakers blasting "R*** me." We previously saw Kendall giving one of his lackeys a shopping list, and then we see the boxes for the speakers in his office, so this was obviously the number one boy's doing. But when the episode aired, a lot of people were theorizing this was actually a stunt by Logan to further push Shiv against Kendall and solidify her loyalty to him. It's an interesting perspective, but I'm sure the writers intended this to just be Kendall. He's definitely not above something like that, plus I don't know what else the shopping list would have been for. Maybe to buy a new aircon for his office. The only other thing Kendall achieves while here is attempting to entice Tom over to his side. And while it would have been really interesting to see Tom on Team Ken, it obviously makes sense that he would see the many warning signs and steer clear. Shiv retaliates at Ken with a public letter calling him a druggie and whatnot. That was apparently so mean that both Rome and Connor don't want to co-sign it. It doesn't seem like the letter said much that the public didn't already know, but the fact that it was from his own sister was probably enough to make Kendall enter depression mode. Plus, we know from a good tweet, bad tweet scene that he's not great at dealing with negative publicity.
Fuck the patriarchy!
Public image is a big focus of this episode, with Kendall deciding to go on this talk show where he's guaranteed to be verbally reduced to atoms. Thankfully, we don't have to experience that train wreck because of Shiv's letter shattering Kendall's resolve. There's also Waystar trying to combat Kendall's attacks by attempting to make Logan look like a great dad, with Rome coming up with this fishing thing that was actually Connor, not Logan, which kinda sums up the whole family dynamic right there. Tom's dealing with some pretty heavy stuff, since he's decided to offer himself up as a sacrificial lamb should the whole DOJ thing end up going south. Logan seems to appreciate the offer, and Shiv is totally chill with her husband potentially being sent to jail. In fact, she thinks it's a great idea. This kicks off several episodes where Shiv is probably at her most unlikable whenever Tom starts to complain about his impending imprisonment and she basically just ignores him. The highlight of this episode is the last scene, where the FBI invades Waystar while Kendall cries about Shiv's letter. The music is crazy good, and the part where Tom casually informs these guys that the FBI is coming is the cherry on top.
And this is not something I want us to get out of proportion or spoil the evening, but it would seem that some agents of federal law enforcement are raiding the premises right now. So if you see them, that's what that is.
Number 21. Kill List. This is the last of the obligatory travel episodes, this time taking the Waystar crew to Norway for a Gojo team building sesh. This might be the most extravagant location yet, with cable cars going up mountains and shit like that. Everyone's expensive outfits are also on point. This is definitely one of the most aesthetically pleasing episodes of the whole series. So this episode is basically laying the groundwork for what the main conflict will be for the rest of the series, that being Kendall and Rome versus Gojo, with Shiv in the middle playing both sides. To the surprise of no one, Kendall isn't keen to let go of a Waystar CEO position now that he finally has it, so he's keen to tank the Gojo deal secretly with Roman, who agrees but initially doesn't seem huge on the idea. I love this new era of Kendall after Logan dies, where he's dead set on keeping the power that just got thrust upon him, and other than season 2, I think it's probably his strongest storyline in the show. It even seems like he's more on top of things than he was last time he attempted to take power, but obviously we know it ends with a fumble as usual. Before this episode, I didn't really have much of an opinion on Matsson, since he only really existed in season 3 as a plot device, but here we get to learn a lot more about him, and now I think he's a really fun addition to the cast. Alexander Skarsgård plays this Elon-type weirdo incredibly well, except unlike Elon, he's actually somewhat clever, since he pretty much instantly sees through Ken and Rome's efforts to make Waystar look crappy to turn him off the deal. The two of them try to keep a ruse going for a bit, but end up dropping the act pretty quick once he calls them out and Roman gets all pissy at him. Rome is easily my least favorite character out of the core group, but this scene where he gets mad at Matsson is pretty satisfying regardless. The best scene with him in this episode is when he and Shiv have a one-on-one chat, where the tension in the air is quite thick, at least until he starts talking about how he sends blood bricks to his assistant Ebba. The other revelation about Matsson that cracks me up every single time is what Greg discovers about his sex life.
When he's fucking randos, he does noise-canceling headphones.
Right.
Podcasts. He just lies back, cans on, watches him slide the beanpole.
But yeah, Matsson, great character, and unlike other side characters where I've complained about them not being in the show enough, this guy I think shows up just the right amount. If he was in the show anymore, then I would probably start to get annoyed. A lot of the funniest stuff in this episode revolves around the titular kill list, which involves all of Waystar's old guard worrying about potentially being axed once the Gojo deal goes through, which results in plenty of deliciously awkward scenes of them trying to ingratiate themselves with the Swedes and failing every single time. This is also when Tom and Shiv start to develop a new weird dynamic, where they're very outwardly hating each other, but also down horrendous for each other.
What are you doing? I'm helping you, Tom. This is why people don't take you seriously, because your shoes are so fucking white. Ow!
Your earlobes are thick and chewy.
What the fuck?
Yeah, like barnacle meat.
So some good plot development this episode, but mainly it's just an excuse to have a whole bunch of great comedy moments, which is half the equation for this show, so I'd say a very successful episode indeed. It's time for the top 20, with every episode from here on out being a stone cold classic. You can honestly reorder these episodes in any way and it'd be completely valid, but it'd probably be a bit anticlimactic to have a 20-way tie for first place, so the show must go on. Starting with number 20, Dundee. I don't remember thinking much of this episode the first time I watched it, but this time around I was surprised at just how good it is. This one sees the Roy crew heading to Logan's hometown in Scotland for a celebration of 50 years in the biz. Like any good episode centered around an event that packs the entire cast into a singular location, it's filled to the brim with hilarious interactions between everyone. The highlight is without a doubt Kendall's L to the OG rap, which instantly became the most iconic scene in the show as soon as it happened. The song is a stone cold banger, but I want to take a second to talk about what Kendall's thought process was. So at this point of the show, he's still under Logan's thumb and has next to no autonomy of his own. I've seen some people suggest that he did the rap knowing Logan would find it cringe as a way to get back at him, but I think he just genuinely thought this would be a good way to honor his dad's legacy, which he clearly admires regardless of how much shit has happened between them. Anyway, enough about that. The rest of the episode is jam-packed with great moments. Greg is stuck in a dilemma where Ewan is going to take away his $250 million inheritance if he continues to be associated with Logan, and when Uncle Fun finds out about this, all it takes is a simple "I like you" for Gregory to immediately fold. Obviously Logan said this to get Greg back on his side, but I get the feeling throughout the few one-on-one scenes with the two of them that Logan actually does like Greg on some level, even if he mostly just finds him annoying. Once Shiv realizes that the whistleblower they've been trying to pay off isn't going to budge, she decides to very nicely tell Logan that he can name whoever he wants as CEO, knowing that he'll name Rhea and then she'll have to deal with all this shit that's about to come to light, which is exactly what ends up happening. Usually Shiv's attempts at scheming end up failing pretty hard, like when she tries to goad Marsha with Logan's affair in this very episode, but this was actually a pretty smart move from her. She even managed to manipulate Logan into naming Rhea pretty easily, even if it was likely already his plan to begin with. My favorite little side plot in this episode is Kendall and his new girlfriend Jennifer. He brings her to the Dundee thing, introduces her to Logan, and as soon as it's obvious that he's not impressed with her, Kendall sends her back home immediately with no reason other than her saying awesome too much. It's such a great microcosm of Kendall's personality and his constant need for his dad's approval, while also being really funny. So just another really funny episode. Heaps of great lines, good character moments, not much to complain about. Number 19. Prague. This episode is a solid contender for the most iconic of the whole series when it comes to just how many amazing bits of dialogue there are. It's Tom's bachelor party, with Roman taking the boys to this underground club for a night to remember. I could show a clip compilation of every hilarious moment in this episode, and it'd just be the entire thing, so I'll just mention the best of the best stuff. There's Greg's coke snorting, Tom swallowing his own load, Roman's story about Kendall locking him in a dog cage, which apparently he liked. There's Greg giving his thoughts on the party, plus much, much more.
This is nightmarish.
It's easily one of the funniest episodes in the show, only surpassed by a couple that we'll get to later. Tom is the focus of this episode, and once you push past all the comedy gold he's given, there's actually quite a bit of character building going on. So Tom's been hyping up his Bucks party as this way for him to let loose and fraternize with other women, since Shiv doesn't seem to really care when he tries to talk to her about it before the party. But throughout the night, it becomes apparent that the party hard and sleep around lifestyle doesn't really fit him at all. And despite him saying to Greg that he's having the time of his life, it's obvious that he's just going through some shit, and would rather just hang out with the fly guys. At the end of the episode, he just wants to see Shiv more than anything. In fact, he seemed to have a much better time hanging out with Greg 2 episodes ago just by themselves. Tom may act like the most ridiculous character in the show, but he's a sensitive soul. He's also a huge dickhead by leaving the fly guys hanging and immediately forgetting about them once the party starts, but everyone's a dickhead on the show, so we'll put that aside. Kendall is still in his relapse era, but by the end of the episode, he's back on track in his crusade against Logan. There's a little arc where he's trying to start something with these entrepreneur ladies, and after he makes a fool of himself at the meeting, he finds the one chick at the party and further embarrasses himself. The turning point for Kendall is when Connor tells him about Logan's philosophy with the dog cage thing, which was to find out who was the weaker dog, which resulted in Roman being sent off to military school. So once Kendall realizes that he is him, he hits up Sandy to go all in on a hostile takeover of Waystar, which will carry us to the finale. I also want to shout out both the cinematography and soundtrack in this episode. All this stuff throughout the party has some awesome lighting as expected, and there's also some great shots throughout the episode, like this one of Kendall separated from the rest of the group, and this one looking up at him from a low angle when he enters killer mode and tells Frank to slander those ladies. And as for the music, whoever was in charge of the soundtrack for the party had some fire taste, with both Heads Will Roll by Yeah Yeah Yeahs and Deadly Valentine by Charlotte Gainsbourg showing up throughout the episode, both bangers. The last thing to touch on is what Shiv's getting up to during all this, that being sleeping around with Nate. I want to quickly talk about Shiv and Nate's dynamic because it's a good way to figure out Shiv's motivations. At first I wondered why, if Shiv and Nate have so much chemistry, then why didn't she stay with him? But it's the fact that Nate has status and treats her as an equal that turns her away. Tom is very clearly below her in terms of status, and he's very aware of that, so Shiv can push him around and he won't complain about it. Shiv also has obvious commitment issues, so it's undoubtedly hard for her to fully stick with Tom, and thus finds herself bouncing between him and Nate throughout this first season. This isn't to say that how Shiv acts is justified, but I think it's a lot more fun to try and understand these horribly flawed characters, instead of just writing them off as evil and giving it no further thought. Anyways, hilarious episode all around, and it has the best scene in all of TV.
And then I splooge in her mouth, and I know, and get this. She kisses me and puts it back in my mouth, and I swallow.
Which, the cum?
I know, so hot.
You swallowed your own load?
Yeah, I heard of it, but I didn't know it actually happened.
No, I haven't heard about it before.
I have, it's a thing, there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is right now.
Number 18. Turnhaven. This episode is the apex of the Pierce acquisition plot that's been bubbling for the past few episodes, with both families meeting up for a weekend of awkward mingling to get the deal solidified. The big highlight is the elongated dinner scene, where the awkward tension builds and builds until the topic of Logan's successor pops up, with Shiv jumping and announcing herself as the future CEO.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Dad, just tell him it's gonna be me.
So this is effectively the end of the Shiv as CEO plot after that major embarrassment, but she's not the only one making a fool of herself. One of my favourite bits is when Roman is making up this book that he's been reading, and then has to dig himself further and further into the lie when he starts getting questioned about the plot and the author of his hit book, The Electric Circus. You've also got Marsha being wonderfully passive-aggressive, Tom being a punching bag as usual, and Connor talking politics with his guy, who he ends up recruiting to the Conhead army. Kendall gets to meet his new crush Naomi, who also happens to have a drug-addled past. It culminates in this part where they get in a helicopter, and I, along with everyone else watching, got really nervous when Ken starts fucking with the controls. Thankfully that gets cut off, but we do get this part where he wakes up with a shit stain on his bed. This episode is just a perfect example of how Succession is at its best when you put everyone in a room together and make them just talk to each other. Every interaction between a Roy and a Pierce is hilariously awkward, and the contempt in the air from both sides is so thick you can cut it with a knife. The only mulligan against this whole situation is that they didn't bring Greg along with them, which would have had unlimited potential for hilarious moments, but he does thankfully show up at the end to announce he now goes by Gregory. I do find it weird that they made the decision to leave Greg behind, but still brought Connor, who's just as dumb as Greg. There's some interesting stuff going on with Roman. After a failed attempt at sex with Tabitha, where she doesn't seem very into his idea of role-playing a corpse, he goes to Jerry to continue whatever sex thing they've got going on that started in the previous episode. The Roman-Jerry team-up is maybe the best material the two of them get, and it's just a really fun dynamic to watch evolve. I don't know if Jerry also gets off on degrading Roman, or if she just finds it amusing, but it's a fun bit regardless. I also love the details of the workers at Turnhaven being obviously annoyed at the Pierces, who don't seem as detestable as the Roys, but still aren't exactly saints. Best portrayed by this bit when Nan carries in the roast, and everyone acts like she's the one who made it. A really fun and tense episode all around, and it caps off what I think is an incredible run, that being the first half of Season 2. Number 17. Volta. This is one of my favourite Kendall episodes, and when I saw it, I knew Season 2 was going to be something special. I've already talked about how much I love the depressed Kendall arc throughout Season 2, and this episode is probably the best display of it. So Logan's tasked Ken and Rome with assessing Volta's worth, with Kendall arguing that it has a lot of potential, and Roman claiming its employees are lazy, plus the fact that they're going to unionize. I really love this scene as it shows how Kendall and Roman both have their own ways of doing things, with Kendall using more conventional methods to research Volta, while Roman uses his social skills to get info out of the employees. And they both have pretty reasonable arguments for why Volta should be saved or chopped, but once Logan finds out about the union thing, it's over. So now Kendall's tasked with gutting Volta, his personal investment from way back in the first episode. And throughout the rest of the episode, us and Lawrence are led to believe that Kendall still got some of that anti-Logan fight in him, with him seemingly plotting to save Volta. But it turns out it was all a ploy, and it ends with this stone cold scene where he fires everyone. If there was somehow any hope for Kendall having any autonomy left this season, this episode efficiently snuffs it out.
Go find some other chicken coop.
And the last scene where he steals a pack of cigs and promptly throws them out shows that he's desperate for any kind of control in this new nightmare world, where Logan's all-seeing eye is burrowing into him 24/7. It reminds me of Jesse Pinkman in Breaking Bad after he's killed Gale, and copes by throwing a huge rager at his house. There's a similar thing in this episode with Kendall partying hard at Greg's new apartment, which he kindly gave to him. I also love this scene of Ken and Shiv talking about the Volta thing, and the way Kendall talks about Logan sums up his mindset pretty concisely.
Seems like a bad move to me.
Yeah, well, Dad's right.
Are you with him on this?
He sees everything, Shiv.
So I love all the Kendall stuff in this episode, and everything else is damn good as well. Tom starting his tenure at ATN with Greg as his lackey, which is easily my favourite era for the two of them. Tom's tasked Greg with sniffing out the inefficiencies at ATN, which is amusing because I didn't think Greg could do any kind of real work at all. This period of Tom and Greg's early days at ATN is home to many of their best moments, with this scene of Greg questioning ATN's morals being a standout.
Kind of against my principles.
Your principles? Craig, don't be an asshole. You don't have principles.
ATN is a very toxic element in the culture.
Seriously, okay, name me one principle that you have.
I don't know, like I'm against racism.
Bullshit, I'm against racism. Everybody's against racism. What else?
Tom also finds out about Shiv's rapid ascension to the Waystar throne, which she spends this episode trying to lock in for real. She's in a bit of a situation since Bernie Sanders has floated the concept of her as his chief of staff if he wins the election, while Logan's offer of CEO seems to have a lot of strings attached. Shiv knows that Bernie ain't winning any elections, so she purposefully fumbles her job with him and goes all in on the Logan gravy train. Well, at least I think she did that on purpose. It's also likely she's just that daft. The allure of daddy's respect is just too powerful for any of these people to move past. Anyway, this added wrinkle of Shiv undermining Tom's plan for Waystar supremacy, plus some added ribbing at dinner with Rome and Tabitha, is enough for Tom to finally snap back at Shiv's bullshit, but it's just a one-time thing for now. Number 16. Austerlitz. The family therapy episode immediately following the vote of no confidence was when I officially knew that this show was going to be one of my favorites. After that climactic vote in the previous episode, this one ratchets back the tension and focuses on developing all the characters, and culminates in one of my favorite scenes across the whole show. Kendall's in a pretty bad place after his historic fumble at the vote, and throughout the episode we see him relapse first with booze and later everything else. The way Kendall's spiral is portrayed is pretty depressing to watch, but the show doesn't drag it out in an attempt to wring out some sympathy from the audience. This episode is probably Kendall at his most sympathetic, and it helps that high Kendall is way more fun than his sober version. The dudes he hangs out with while he becomes a meth head are pretty amusing too. For the family therapy itself, it's about as awkward as you could imagine, with everyone being too pussy to say anything meaningful against Logan, who just keeps playing the same note about how he does everything for his family, just like Walter White. Shiv is the only one with anything remotely interesting to say. In fact, all her scenes fighting with Logan are some of the best in the episode. I really do like Shiv in season 1, even though she's a meanie to Tom. Roman is also pretty likable in this episode for once, since when he finds out Kendall's gone off his rocker and is high off his mind, he immediately drops everything to go collect him from the druggos he's hanging out with. The part right after where Rome's trying to make a call about the satellite launch while Kendall's being silly is wonderful stuff.
What are you fucking for?
It culminates in one of the best scenes in the series, where the whole family gathers to argue with each other. Logan's pissed at Shiv for supposedly conspiring with the enemy, she's mad at him for being a dickhead, but it really gets good when Kendall shows up to join the fun. He's so much fun when he's high, and without his cringe filter, he can rip into Logan without sugarcoating. It's incredibly entertaining stuff, with my favorite part being Kendall's assessment of Logan's business strategy.
You don't have a business strategy, Dad. Your whole business model is based on seducing presidents. You're a really high-class hooker. No offense.
Hey.
Fuck off.
The best parts of this show are when you put all the characters in a room and let them go off, and this is maybe the best example of that. When I first saw this episode, I instantly thought that this was the best episode of the show, and even after seeing the other seasons play out, I still come back to this one whenever I want a good dosage of Roy family drama. Number 15. Retired Janitors of Idaho. This episode sees the long-awaited shareholder meeting finally unfold, and is the conclusion to the Sandy Stewie plot that was simmering in the background for almost 2 seasons. This is one of the most chaotic and hilarious episodes of the series. I didn't remember much of this episode the first time around, so on this rewatch I was surprised at just how good it really is. It's kind of hard to talk about the plot of this episode because it's basically just everyone gathers in a room and shits their pants trying to figure out what to do while Logan is delirious. The major plot details are that Waystar is really desperate to not let the control of the company go to a vote, and Team Sandy Stewie isn't too keen on it either, so they have to find some kind of deal while stalling for time. Meanwhile, Kendall's fucking around doing who knows what until he decides to gatecrash the meeting. The sheer amount of great dialogue in this episode is insane. I want to specifically highlight Carl, who really came into his own this season as low-key one of the funniest characters.
But at the very least, he should be on stage.
It would be great to get the body up there.
Okay.
So all the stuff with the Waystar team is comedy gold, so let's have a look at Kendall's side. By this point, he's completely off the chain, and any hope of him having any chance against Logan is long gone. So he's basically just fumbling around being an idiot, with everyone on his team fed up with his crap, especially Jess. Yeah, this episode is basically just one meme-worthy moment after another, and as such, it's kinda hard to talk about specific moments. I'll just highlight the bit where Colin evacuates the imaginary cat and move on.
What the fuck is going on? It's fine. It's all right.
What is
Could you
that?
leave, please? That is an imaginary cat. Now, could you please fuck off?
Number 14. Rehearsal. The second episode of the final season is pretty much solely about laying the groundwork to make Logan's surprise death next episode hit as hard as possible. After season 3 left tension between the siblings and Logan at an all-time high, I was waiting eagerly to see what their next meetup would be like, and we get it here at the end of the episode. But before all that, a lot of this episode is focused on Connor, giving us some of his most depressing bits. The Golden Trio shows up at his wedding rehearsal dinner to find out Will has gone AWOL, so they hang out with him the rest of the night to make him feel better. They pretty much spend the whole time making fun of him or just ignoring him entirely to focus on the Gojo deal, which Sandy and Stewie want to get a bit more dough out of, despite Logan wanting to get the thing done and move on. The drama in this episode uses the Gojo deal as a gateway to get to the more personal stuff, which is displayed perfectly in the scene where Logan comes to the karaoke session. You can tell Logan is trying to be genuine with his kids for once, but by this point, too many bridges have burned for his lame attempts at reconciliation to mean anything, and eventually it devolves back into the usual name-calling and whatnot. It reminds me of that last Chuck scene we got in Better Call Saul, where he was trying to reach out to Jimmy and got similarly stonewalled. Also noticed how none of the siblings give a fuck about Connor's problems, but are totally fine with using his mistreatment as ammo against Logan whenever they need it. This whole scene is just amazing, especially with the knowledge that it's the last time most of them will interact with Logan. It's also sad seeing Roman, who was always the biggest Logan dick rider of the family, wanting so desperately for his apologies to be genuine, while Kendall and Shiv just keep making stupid comments. Also love Kendall's callback to the season 3 finale.
Just good business sense. Gotta make our own pile.
Oh,
like that.
Yeah, I mean...
This episode also made me feel for Connor more than any other, with him making it clear that he knows that his family doesn't care about him, but he keeps soldiering on regardless, which in a way has freed him from the cyclical drama that the other siblings are stuck in. So that's the juicy stuff. There's also this scene where Logan gives a grand speech at ATN about how he's not falling off but is actually just getting started, which we of course know doesn't last long, but it's a cool moment regardless. I like seeing Greg and Tom all anxious about Logan moseying around ATN with no idea what to do. Speaking of ATN, most of the comedy in this episode comes from Kerry's news anchor audition tape, which everyone constantly mocks unless Logan is around. The best of these scenes is when Hugo and Jerry are giggling at the video, but are interrupted by Logan coming in, and then Hugo is forced to put his laptop screen up on the telly. I don't understand why Hugo couldn't just open his laptop and close the video first before plugging in the HDMI, but he might just be a bit stupid. The other amusing bit with this whole Carrie saga is when Tom tasks Greg with letting her know that she isn't fit for the job. I always love when Tom delegates some shitty task to Greg, whether it be this or firing people on Zoom or any number of things. Just a really great episode all around. I liked it when it came out, but rewatching it now with the knowledge of what comes next made it hit insanely hard. Shame we didn't get to see Kendall or Shiv try their hands at karaoke though. Number 13. DC. Another iconic episode, with the Waystar team having to testify in front of Congress at Washington. The concept of these incompetent Roy folks in a situation like this is ripe for some amazing comedy, and this episode pulls no punches. I know I've said this a lot, but this again is one of the funniest episodes of the show, mainly thanks to Tom's testimony in particular.
By Gregory Hirsch. Is that someone known to you, Mr. Wamsgans?
No, sorry.
No?
No? No, Tom?
The obvious standout is Bernie asking about the email Tom sent 67 times to Greg.
That was the only 2-hour period in which you did not send an email to Mr. Hirsch with the title, You can't make a Tomlet without breaking some Gregs. You sent the same email to him 67 times in one evening.
I'm guessing these emails were Tom's way of letting Greg know that if he would ever be outed for doing anything shady, then he'd take Greg down with him. Or maybe it was just a funny joke. This whole scene is maybe Tom at his most cringe. The other big moment is Kendall and Logan testifying, where Logan seems a bit useless just reading off a thing and having lame responses to the questions, but thankfully Kendall takes over to act all Sigma and throw some heat back on Bernie. I love getting any scraps of Kendall actually being competent, so I eat this shit up. We've been seeing him slowly gaining back that killer instinct throughout the season, and this is where he finally starts to feel fully formed again, ready to strike back at Logan at the end of the next episode. Also gotta love Connor's reactions to Kendall going beast mode. This episode is also when we're really introduced to the comedic legend that is Hugo. He popped up a few episodes ago, but this is where he really starts to shine as one of the funniest characters, particularly his comments during the testimonies.
Let's get the surrogates prepped with that line. They call Gil Meth Head Santa because he so rarely delivers.
Meanwhile, Shiv is tasked with the unenviable job of convincing a victim witness not to testify about her experiences with Mo and the like, which she manages to do at the cost of her morals. Shiv used to be so staunchly opposed to Logan's fucked up ways back in season 1, but ever since he started dangling that CEO nugget in front of her, she's become more and more corrupt just to please him, and this is maybe the last nail in that coffin. You can tell when she's telling the victim about how she's going to fix all the problems of Waystar and bring down those evil men, she's more so trying to convince herself than anyone else. It's honestly one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the series. Rhea isn't impressed with this whole forcing women to stay silent thing and jumps off the Roy train, and that's the last time we see her. She was a good plot device character for this season, but didn't leave much of an impact on me as her own person, and I'm not really sad to see her go. Now as for what Roman's up to, he's gone with Carl and Laird to do some deal in Turkey, and then out of nowhere they become hostages by these random terrorists. It's maybe the most out of left field bit in the whole show, and it doesn't really have much impact beyond giving us some more great comedy. It really is a bizarre moment, but it works in the scene's favour by making us feel just as out of our element as Rome and Co are feeling. Overall, this episode strikes a pretty perfect balance between the comedy bits and the plot drama, and it sets the stage for the finale really well, with Logan deciding they need a blood sacrifice to get the DOJ off their ass. Number 12. Honeymoon States. This episode comes right after the bombshell that was Connor's wedding, and is just as good as that episode in its own way. The genius decision to kill off Logan basically at the start of a season means we have a heap of episodes to explore every phase of the aftermath, with this one dealing with the immediate fallout. This is basically a bottle episode set entirely in Logan's apartment, where everyone has gathered to discuss what they're gonna do without the head honcho running things. The main thing causing the conflict is this paper Frank finds that names Kendall as Logan's successor, with the addendum of his name being either underlined or crossed out. This one little thing is such a genius addition to the story. It's purposely left as vague as possible if it's an underline or not, so each character has to come to their own conclusion. If you ask me, it's pretty clearly a shitty underline, since it starts under his name and just gets sloppy by the end. Obviously, Kendall sees it as proof that he should ascend the throne, but everyone else seems pretty skeptical, particularly Shiv. So the rest of the episode is everyone discussing what to do with this info, and eventually they settle on Kendall and Rome as co-CEOs, while Shiv is left in the dust. Apparently Greg was also mentioned in the paper, but no one really seems to care about that. This episode got me firmly back on the Kendall hype train, since as soon as he sees that paper with his name on it, he's instantly back in his killer mode and it's glorious. We already got to see a bit of him come back in the last episode when he took control after Logan died, but this episode is where he really locks in. The scene at the end where he blackmails Hugo into becoming his underling is so good, with that last shot of him smiling leaving me very excited to see Kendall finally get his big win. And while we of course didn't get that, it was good while it lasted. I think the best character in this episode is Shiv, who's having a pretty rough time even compared to everyone else. This bit with Tom trying to reconcile with her and talking about when they met is really nice, and it's good to get some insight into the origins of their relationship, since we know basically nothing about it. Apparently Shiv was in a pretty dark period of her life, and Tom was there for her, but we don't get much more than that. It does help to paint a picture of how Shiv and Tom could have gotten into a relationship in the first place, since it always seemed like they weren't very good for each other. Sadly, they've been through way too much shit for this nice moment to mean anything, and she's further humiliated when she's shafted by Ken and Rome. I think the writers taking these steps to promote Shiv to a more antagonistic position against Ken and Rome for the final stretch of the show was a great move, since she's always been the odd one out of the trio, and it's totally understandable why she would jump over to Matsson's side once that becomes an option. Most of the fun stuff in this episode come from the Waystar Old Guard, who, now that Logan is gone, are unleashed and can be as savage as they want. The highlight is this scene where Carl rips into Tom, who's in a bit of a pickle now that he put all his Gregs in the Logan basket.
Can I frame the question for you, but as a friend?
Sure.
Just so you'd be prepared. You're a clumsy interloper and no one trusts you. The only guy pulling for you is dead, and now you're just married to the ex-boss's daughter, and she doesn't even like you. And you are fair and squarely fucked.
After an episode as huge as Connor's wedding, you would expect there to be a drop-off in quality, but this episode really keeps the hot streak going and lays the foundation for the ensuing power struggle that'll rip the family apart once and for all. And I'm not the only one who considers this to be a 10 out of 10 episode.
Hey everyone, my name is Quinn the GM. I mostly talk about A Song of Ice and Fire on YouTube, so I've never really publicly spoken about Succession, but it is one of my all-time favorite shows, and I think Honeymoon States is one of the most underrated episodes. First and foremost, I love the title. Not only is it referring to a honeymoon, given the last episode was a wedding, despite the big event happening last episode, it also deals with the state these characters are all moving into without the oppressive force of Logan Roy looming over them. They're entering a honeymoon period where they're not having to dictate their actions via the constant threats and barrage of hate of Logan Roy. And it's such an interesting place for all of these characters to be. We've never seen them in an environment that is just entirely their own, where they're not having to deal with someone immediately above them who actively hates pretty much everything. I also really like a lot of the events here. It's a lot of fun kind of internal politicking, seeing the camps align between the loyalists to Logan, the people who were higher up in the company, and the kids beginning to kind of draw sides themselves. And it also deals with what I think is a good alternative to what we got in Season 4. I think Season 4 would have been a lot stronger had we not used Lucas Madsen as such a direct comparison to Logan Roy. I don't really care for Lucas as a character, and I don't think he really adds a ton to the show, and I think it would have been a lot more interesting to see how these characters function in an environment without a major antagonistic force, because I think these relationships are developed enough, and these characters are developed enough to create organic and compelling conflicts without the need for some outside villainous force, and we get to see that in this episode before Lucas kind of takes center stage for the back half of the season, which, as I've said, I'm not the biggest fan of.
Number 11. Hunting. This episode continues Season 2's incredible hot streak, with the gang going to Hungary for a hunting trip. Season 2 has a lot of travel episodes, and for my money, this is the best one. The hunting trip itself isn't really the focus, it's more so about all the characters' reactions to Logan's announcement that he's going to buy Pierce News. Pretty much everyone seems to think it's a terrible idea, since Pierce is diametrically opposed to Waystar's ideals, minus the dick riders like Kendall.
Don't be such a suck-up, it's pathetic.
What about you, Romulus?
I fucking love it, but that's my honest opinion.
So everyone's going into this trip with an air of dread over everything, since in addition to the Pierce thing, there's also the news that someone's been leaking stuff to this reporter lady, which puts Greg in the crosshairs since he had an encounter with her. Everyone's being cagey with each other because no one knows who the mole is, and it doesn't take long for people to start pointing fingers. This all leads to the big scene of the episode, Bore on the Floor. But before the game gets going, the tension as Logan goes around the table and grills everyone is incredibly tense, as everyone dances around their actual thoughts on the Pierce thing. Most of Season 2's first few episodes are dedicated to showing just how much power Logan wields over his underlings, and this is without a doubt the greatest display of that power. I reckon it's Brian Cox's best episode in the whole series. The main takeaway from this scene is that Tom has the opportunity to rat on Greg, but he keeps his mouth shut and retains Gregory's loyalty. It's proof that Tom and Greg do have a genuine bond, which makes Greg's request for a breakup in the safe room episode even more of a betrayal in Tom's eyes. Kendall is happy to tell on Roman though. This bit of him grabbing Rome's phone and holding it away from him is such a classic sibling moment.
Bore on the floor? What'd you say?
Fuck you. I am not a moron, Dad.
Roman trying to justify himself contacting Pierce to Logan was some stellar acting from Kieran Culkin, by the way. He portrays that baby version of Rome so well. It's so good that it actually made me feel sorry for Romulus, which is an impressive feat. Also gotta shout out everyone's drippy hunting outfits, especially Tom and Greg with their matching hats. This scene with them discussing Ratfucker Sam is another highlight.
Is he nice? Is he nice? You're asking about the moral character of a man named Ratfucker Sam? He is a fucking piece of fucking shit is what he is.
Another iconic episode to add to the pile, and now entering the top 10, things are about to start getting really, really, really good. Number 10. Too Much Birthday. As soon as I found out there would be an episode dedicated to Kendall's birthday party, I knew we were in for something awesome, and lo and behold, this episode does not disappoint. After a few episodes of Kendall not really getting much of a spotlight, here we have a full episode pretty much entirely about him, and it's pretty much an excuse for Jeremy Strong to show off just how good he is at playing this character. This episode is the major turning point of the season for him, where he goes from deranged fighting against Logan to completely demoralized and defeated by the end. The party itself is the most Kendall shit you can possibly imagine, hilariously over the top and indulgent in the best way possible. All the characters' reactions to the event are great, particularly Roman's, although that's all the nice I'm saying about Roman this episode because he's a pretty major prick. First he cold shoulders Shiv to go chat with Matsson by himself, and then flex his apparent smarts in front of her, and then when confronted by Kendall he's really mean to him and gets a bit physical too. I think this is the episode that made me hate Roman more than any other, and I know I'm supposed to hate all of them, but I hate him the most. Shiv thankfully isn't as cruel, she's mostly just annoyed at Roman and copes by hitting the dance floor. Connor just spends the whole episode not wanting to take his coat off for some reason, and he has this injury that Alan Ruck apparently got in real life, so they just wrote it into the episode. I like seeing Willa stand up for him when Dasha tries to get him to follow the rules. Now as for Kendall himself, he starts the episode all smug and happy about how awesome his party is, but throughout the night things just keep wearing him down. First he discovers that Shiv and Rome, who he seemed really happy to see, are just there to meet with Matsson. To be fair to them though, Kendall is definitely not above that kind of thing himself, and he was pretty rude to them the last time they were all in a room together, not to mention all the shit with Shiv's letter and Kendall's little speaker stunt. He's delusional though, so I'll cut him some slack. The breakdown really begins when he finds out his kids apparently left a present for him, and he becomes hell-bent on finding the needle in this haystack of expensive gifts. This scene sums up Kendall's situation pretty aptly. He's surrounded by expensive presents from so-called friends, but he really has no one except Naomi. And this is the last episode where we see the two of them as an item, so he doesn't have her for much longer. Plus their relationship seemed pretty superficial from the get-go, exemplified by the scene where she gives him her present, a watch. She should have taken a page out of Connor's book and gotten some old bread. Logan's present of a $2 billion payout doesn't really brighten his spirits either. Tom's also not having a great time, despite starting the episode utterly elated that he doesn't have to go to prison. His demeanor sours once he remembers that his marriage with Shiv is basically just a different type of prison, plus Greg's rubbing salt in the wound by making successful moves on Dasha. Tom and Greg have some really funny bits together in this episode, especially this part where they get a little gay, or more gay than usual.
Okay, well, how'd you get Shiv?
Well, Greg, I'll tell you. I got a dick the size of a red sequoia and I fuck like a bullet train, okay?
Prove it.
What?
So a pretty similar vibe to Tom's bachelor party back in season 1, but with a lot more drama going on and some really good character stuff. Number 9. Church and State. The penultimate episode of the series finally shows us one of the most important events, Logan's funeral. The heavy hitters this episode are Roman and Kendall in very different ways. Roman spent the whole season yapping about how he's pre-grieved Logan's death and he's all good and ready for anything and all that nonsense, and once he steps up to the microphone we finally get to see him fall apart. Great acting by Kieran Culkin as we all know, but I'm always going to be peeved about him swiping the Best Actor Emmy from Bob Odenkirk, who was long overdue for it. This scene isn't quite enough for me to become sympathetic to Roman, but it's fantastic regardless. I'll come back to Kendall's eulogy in a second, but Shiv also gets one and hers is maybe the most touching out of all of them. You can argue that in the recent months leading up to Logan's demise, Shiv's relationship with him was the most strained out of all the siblings, and you can see just how much she wishes that were different. Another stellar performance from Sarah Snook, who's just been on fire this entire season. I know everyone calls Rome the MVP of this season, but if you ask me, I think Shiv and Sarah's performance took the crown from my number one boy in this last stretch of episodes. This season solidified her right up there with Kendall as one of my favourite characters. Also got to mention Ewan's speech, which is easily the most informative out of the three, since we finally get some more substantial info on him and Logan's fucked up backstory, specifically how their sister Rose died. Really cool to see a different side of Ewan, who up until now had pretty much exclusively been Mr. Grouchy Logan hater. Now let's talk about Kendall, who goes through quite a bit in this one. Coming right off the shit show of the election the previous night, Rava decides to take the kids away and skip a funeral, which makes him all pissy and he starts yapping about how he wants custody. Much like how Logan got custody over Caroline for similarly selfish reasons. Then to add to the bad news, Jess announces that she's done working with him and is ready to move on. This is a huge moment because Jess has been there for Kendall since the very beginning. She stuck by him through the bear hug misfire, then his failed campaign against Logan, his lame startup with the siblings, but after all that, helping to elect the worst human ever president is the breaking point for her to pull the plug. Juliana Canfield's been a consistently underrated performer on this show, even with basically no material to work with most of the time, so the writers finally giving her some more substantial stuff in these last few episodes was great to see, especially for me, the #1 Jess fan in the world. It's incredibly satisfying to see her finally stop putting up with Ken's bullshit, and it's a great send-off to such a minor character. So with the loss of both his kids and Jess, all Kendall has left is the pursuit of a Waystar throne. Once Roman biffs it at the podium, Ken sees his opportunity to make an impression on the many influential figures currently present, and boy does he make an impression. Shiv and Ewan's speeches were more about their personal relationships with Logan, while Kendall's is about acknowledging the sheer influence he had over everything and the empire he built. With this speech, Kendall basically advertises himself as the de facto successor to his father's kingdom. His speech is so good that he almost makes capitalism sound awesome. Afterwards, he wastes no time establishing his dominance over the broken Roman and recruiting Hugo as his attack dog for the upcoming final battle. The scene with him and Hugo is probably my favourite of the episode, and once again had me fully riding that Team Kendall hype train as we headed into the finale.
You know, Hugo, life isn't nice. It's contingent. People who say they love you also fuck you. So this is an explicit plan to fuck the deal. Me rule the world. But it won't be a collaboration, okay? You'll be my dog. Happy? Woof, woof.
On the other team is Shiv, who spent her time before the funeral scheming with Matsson to get past the Mencken roadblock by appointing an American CEO of Waystar, specifically her. Shiv seems pretty proud of her conniving, but to me it was pretty damn obvious that Matsson wasn't going to stick with her as the CEO candidate. In fact, this episode starts planting the seeds for Tom's ascension, since he skipped a funeral to keep ATN running.
You would never have dared not to come to his funeral when he was alive.
Yeah, well, the thing about your dad is that he's lost quite a lot of influence over the past few days.
Matsson very clearly takes note of this, and I have a feeling Logan would have approved as well, since he gave Kendall shit for taking time off to celebrate Logan's birthday way back in episode 1. So that's all the juicy drama stuff, but as usual there's plenty of other little nuggets to mention. One standout bit is Caroline assembling all of Logan's exes over the years and making them all sit together, which was a surprisingly touching moment. A hugely impactful episode overall, and like any good penultimate, it lays the groundwork for the finale incredibly well. The Kendall stuff especially, I think, is some of the best character work in the whole series. Number 8. Nobody is ever missing. Here we have our first season finale, and it took me quite a while to decide which ones I liked more than others, but after careful consideration, I'm putting season 1's finale as the least good. Not to say I don't love this episode, I mean it's in the top 10, so I think that goes without saying. I actually used to call this my favourite episode. Shows how much my opinions can change on a rewatch. This is probably the most unique finale or episode for multiple reasons. For one thing, none of the others have vehicular manslaughter. This moment with Kendall and the waiter dude makes the whole episode. Up until then it's pretty standard fare, and then out of nowhere we've got Kendall desperately trying to save a dude from drowning. Well, he doesn't really try that hard, but if I was in this situation I probably wouldn't do much better. After that we get to follow Ken every step of the way back to his hotel, attempting to cover up the evidence, and then back into the wedding for a cathartic dance number. The episode does such a great job at putting us inside Kendall's head, and it makes this bit where he gets to cut loose and play with the kids a really satisfying moment. But of course his happiness is but a fleeting moment, as the next morning, Logan pulls Kendall aside to tell him that he's got him cornered. With nothing else to do, Kendall cries in his daddy's arms, and that's the end of season 1. Not quite the crazy cliffhangers of season 2 and 3, but still a shocking and powerful ending regardless. Jeremy Strong's performance throughout this whole last chunk of the episode is outstanding stuff, but it's merely a taster of the juiciness that is his season 2 performance. But there's plenty more going on in this episode. Shiv finally officially confesses her affair with Nate and uses it as an opportunity to pitch an open relationship on her and Tom's wedding night of all nights. Shiv does some pretty lame stuff throughout this show, but I reckon this might be the worst. Tom is too submissive to do anything about it, other than passive-aggressively removing Nate from the premises, but not before making him return his wine. I love seeing this small bit of dominance from Tom, and the look he shares with Greg after is awesome. The drama surrounding Kendall's bear hug is all great stuff too. The scene with all the family in a room arguing about it is fantastic, because by this point you totally understand all of their perspectives, so you can just bask in the impeccable writing and performances. And despite this being a tense family drama scene, it's somehow also hilarious.
I could just do with the assistance of the family firm on my ambitions to become president.
Right, exactly. You're all living in a fucking dream world.
Yeah, this is the episode where Connor decides he's going to become the president, and while it's a shame that never came to fruition, it was the perfect plot point to give to this character. Connor's been a farce from the beginning, and now with his presidential journey ahead of him, it gives the writers seemingly endless material for comedy gold. One of the funniest scenes of the series is in this episode, when Roman goes into the bathroom to watch the launch of his satellite. Kieran Culkin is the undisputed MVP of reacting to an unfortunate situation, the other obvious example being the dick pic in season 3, but I still think this is his funniest moment of the show. The main other thing to mention is Greg and Kendall's talk before he goes and kills a guy. Greg very unsubtly tells him about the papers he kept from the cruise thing, which really steps up Kendall's perception of Gregory. It's a moment that doesn't get paid off until the next season finale, and it's an example of the writing of a series being so consistent that if you told me the entire story was written out from the very beginning, I would have believed you. Really great finale overall, and the fact that we still have the other 3 ahead of us is proof of how stacked this top 10 really is. But before we move on, let's hear from another big Kendall fanboy.
Nobody Is Ever Missing is an absolutely glorious finale to Succession's first season. If Whose Side Are You On is the part of the roller coaster where it finishes climbing up the hill and finally travels down, Nobody's Ever Missing is the part where it does 18 loops before coming to a screeching halt. Succession has a tendency to have incredible season finales, and the fact that I would personally put this one as the 3rd best of all the season finales is a testament to the quality of this series. The main reason I wanted to talk about this episode, however, was so I could talk about one of my favorite characters in the show, Kendall because my daddy told me to Roy, who did nothing wrong and advocated for women's rights. Jeremy Strong gives easily one of the best overall performances in the show, largely in part to the fact that he's fucking insane, but also because he is an extremely good actor. If there's one episode of the show that demonstrates just how incredible Jeremy Strong's performance in the show is, it is this episode by a mile. Particularly the last 20 minutes when Kendall goes watch this and then does a trick and kills Andrew. Mr. Films touched on this briefly, but the way that the episode puts us into Kendall's wet and soggy shoes and shows us how he processes such a traumatic event is unbelievable. It's such a tense and raw sequence because we get to watch this spoiled, immature businessman make his way through the messy wilderness and into his hotel room in an attempt to escape such a life-altering event. And the show takes its time to show us every detail of the sequence to let the audience themselves process the implications of this moment. I love the moment where Kendall gets to his room and realizes that he's fucked because he forgot his key card. You can literally feel his heart drop in this scene. If this were one of my tier lists, I'd end this segment by giving this episode an S tier, but it's not, so I can't.
Number 7. All the Bells Say. When this episode aired, I considered it to be the best episode to date, but obviously my opinion has changed somewhat since then. Regardless, we all know this is a 10 out of 10 episode, so let's jump right in. This continues right on from Chianti with the Italy setting, and is just as visually pleasing as before. The episode revolves around the evolving Gojo deal with Waystar, which Mattson has flipped from Waystar buying Gojo to Gojo buying Waystar, which is bad news for the siblings, who are still desperate to take over the company. But before that, the family gives Kendall an intervention after he seemingly tried to kill himself in the pool. I don't think this was Kendall's intention at all, although it's totally understandable to think he would, considering he's had a pretty shitty past few weeks. The best part of this scene is when Kendall calls himself the eldest son, which sets off Connor. Poor guy can't ever catch a break. Thankfully, he gets a win right after, with Willa accepting his marriage proposal. The first of 2 big standout scenes is soon after, once Roman and Shiv find out about their imminent cucking by Gojo, and they go to tell Kendall about it. Kendall doesn't want to hear it and completely disintegrates in one of Jeremy Strong's best display of his acting chops in the whole series. The bombshell moment is him revealing that he killed that kid, which made me jump for joy since I consider that event back in season 1 as the defining moment of Kendall's storyline, and it felt incredibly satisfying to see him finally tell someone about it. Any mention of this event is such a rare occurrence that whenever it does happen, it lets you know that shit's getting serious. And in a surprising turn of events, both Shiv and Roman take it pretty well, and this ends up being quite a nice, wholesome moment. In fact, this is what seems to bring the siblings back together after being against each other for a whole season. And once they band together to go against Logan, I started to get both really excited and really worried. It's not in Succession's nature for things to go smoothly, so I knew some shit was going to happen once they confronted their dad. The most important part is right after, when Shiv lets Tom know about their plans to kill Logan, and she does a really bad job at making it seem like a good thing for Tom. This whole season has been building up to Tom finally having enough of Shiv's bullshit, plus he's been getting closer to Logan, so when this phone call happens, he sees his opportunity to make a move, but not without first recruiting his trusty Sporus. This bit with him and Greg does a great job at towing the line, where if you've been paying attention, you can tell this is him about to betray Shiv, but less observant viewers probably wouldn't think anything of it. Before the grand finale, we've got this part where the siblings are in the car heading to Logan's hideout, and this is when I started to get swept up in the hype, because it was just so exciting to see the siblings all working together for the first time. The mention of beating Logan has also woken up Kendall from his depressive state, and he's right back in business mode. Watching this for the first time was maybe the most excited I've ever been while watching the show. All of this leads into the big ending, where the three siblings face off against Logan. This scene is unbelievably good, with every character getting their own standout moment. Rome actually manages to stand his ground against Logan for once, which is great to see. The part where Logan gets pissy and mocks Shiv is beyond cruel, and overall this is one of Logan's most ruthless scenes. I love how Kendall isn't really fazed by any of it since he's been through all this 20 times, but for Shiv and Rome, this level of brutality is something they're less familiar with. The crown jewel of the scene is without a doubt the very last moment. After Logan's revealed that he changed the divorce clause and the siblings are powerless, Shiv wonders who tipped him off before they got there. Cue the Tom Wambsgans dramatic entrance, and this look from Shiv as she realizes she's been betrayed is incredible. Amazing note to end on, and while I do consider this season to be the weakest of the four, I can't deny that it has an absolutely killer conclusion. Number 6. This is not for tears. It felt a bit weird to put 3 finales in a row, but the quality difference between them is so minuscule that I could barely decide which order to put them in, so it made sense to put them all back to back. I started watching Succession after season 2 came out, so this episode is pretty significant for me. The finale sees the Roy fam isolated on a yacht, while Logan decides which of them to sacrifice to get the DOJ off their ass. The scene where everyone sits around the table and points fingers at who should go to prison is great in that specific Succession way, where everyone is supremely passive-aggressive and dancing around trying to make themselves sound like bad options before shifting the heat to someone else. It seems clear that Tom is the one to kill, since he was the head of Cruisers and floundered pretty hard at the hearing. Shiv even vouches for his imprisonment, which is pretty fucked up. In fact, let's talk about Shiv and Tom first. So ever since that open relationship nugget at their wedding night, Tom's been stewing on that, along with Shiv cucking him out of a plan to become Waystar Overlord. He's been a good boy and kept it to himself, but here on the brink of him potentially being axed, he finally let Shiv know just how crappy things are. This is maybe the best scene of the episode, which is a pretty high bar, but anytime Sarah Snook and Matthew McFadden have a big scene like this, it's always a home run. It's gonna take another season for Tom to fully betray Shiv, and another season after that for them to have a full-on shouting match, but this simple scene of Tom expressing his unhappiness with their relationship is the first real confrontation they have, and combined with the music, it really hits you in the feels. And right after that, Tom continues his new Sigma mode by eating Logan's chicken right off the plate in front of him. I don't think anyone other than Jesse Armstrong could conceive such an incredible moment. It's both hilarious and awesome to see Tom assert some sort of dominance, even when it's just him eating a bit of chicken.
What the fuck was that?
It's getting to people, Dad, the tension.
He ate my fucking chicken.
We've also got to mention Greg's testimony before Congress, which opens the episode. Maybe his funniest scene in the show. It's so funny that it almost feels like the writers are farming clips for Instagram Reels.
If it is to be said, so it is.
This last scene between Ken and Logan where he gets the news is simply spectacular. I feel like I've used that word a lot today, but I'm running out of different adjectives to describe how good a scene is. At first, Kendall seems at peace with the concept of himself going to prison because it'll serve as penance for when he killed that guy. But Logan shrugs it off as nothing to worry about, no real person involved. And this is the moment when Kendall decides he's done with doing his dad's bidding. He's the killer Logan always wanted him to be. He just needs a bit of motivation. This scene and the build up to Kendall's press conference build the tension so well, since you know it's not going to go down the way the show is suggesting. And the moment where Kendall pauses is when shit gets real.
But my father keeps a watchful eye over every inch of his whole empire. But I think this is the day his reign ends.
Unbelievably awesome way to end the season, and that final shot of Logan with a slight grin on his face is perfection. He's proud of his son for finally stepping up, but he's also royally pissed off. Now we just had to wait 2 long years for season 3. Number 5. Which side are you on? This is the episode that convinced me this show was going to be something special. Succession was good from the first episode, but this one takes it to a whole new level. It's none other than the famed Vote of No Confidence episode, where Kendall takes his first in a series of many major L's, and we discover just how ruthless Logan can be. Let's jump right into that because it's what makes the episode so memorable. The seeds for Kendall's coup against Logan were planted in the previous episode, with this one opening with the rebels meeting up to figure out their chances of success. I like seeing Kendall and a cocky Roman teaming up, and I love Jerry in full battle mode.
Maybe stoke the old resentments?
Leave Macbeth, get your little fucking screwdriver in.
It's not a fucking teddy bear's picnic, Roman. It's a massacre.
I wish we got to see more of this quad squad, but what we do get is a lot of fun. This first scene clearly establishes who's on what side, with the main unknowns being Lawrence and cancer patient Ilona. Roman's in charge of dealing with Lawrence since he hates Kendall, and this scene between the two of them is probably my least favourite of the episode because I find both of these characters highly annoying. But on a brighter note, there's a killer montage building up to the meeting, with Kendall running off to secure Ilona's vote while everyone else prepares for the big day. The first season uses the main Succession theme quite a bit, but this lower pitch version in this montage is definitely the best use of it. I'm jumping around a bit, but I also love the scene earlier in the episode where Kendall is summoned to Logan's place for a McDonald's dinner, with Kendall immediately worried that the game is up. Turns out Logan just wanted to hang out for once, making Ken question whether this whole plan is a bad idea. I like seeing the two of them hang out regardless. Any moment of Logan not being a complete tool is a precious one. Now let's jump back to the big scene. The tension built throughout the board meeting is incredible, with Frank having to stall for time while Kendall goes through an increasingly ridiculous comedy of errors to get to the meeting. These days we take for granted the concept of Kendall fumbling the ball at the goal line every chance he gets, but you gotta understand this was only the 6th episode, so watching this I had no idea just how badly he was gonna fuck this up. But let's reel it back a bit and ask, did Kendall really fuck up? Well, obviously yes, because he lost and Logan fired him. But what led to that happening is what we're looking at. Kendall had to go to Long Island to secure Ilona's vote. You could say he didn't need to do this, but it's clearly established at the start that they don't have enough solid votes, with too many still in play for it to be a lock. And he clearly did make the right call because he did manage to change her mind. How he did that I would have loved to see, but it's not really important. All the factors that made Kendall lose the vote were a consequence of him not being there, and he only wasn't there because of ridiculous circumstances completely out of his control. Him not being in the room meant his statement couldn't have the same impact, which led to the vibes being off, which led to Stewie and Lawrence abstaining. Even with those missing votes though, it was 4-4 with Roman being the decider. I have a feeling if Kendall was there and the vibes were good, then he would have stood his ground, like he does in similar scenes later in the show. All I'm trying to say is, I don't think Kendall can be totally blamed for fumbling the vote, when to me it seems like it was entirely out of his control. Like, how the hell was he supposed to predict a terror threat stopping his helicopter ride? You could say that going to all that effort to get Ilona's vote was a waste of time since he already had enough, but you know, better safe than sorry, except in this scenario. So the vote and the build up to it is the meat of the episode, but there's plenty of other stuff going on. Shiv's on a trip to DC to meet up with Nate, where he offers her an opportunity to work with Bernie Sanders. Pretty much all of Shiv's screen time is spent with Nate in this episode, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I don't know, I've always found them to have a pretty interesting dynamic. Obviously Nate is an annoying slime ball, but I think the hate for him is a bit overblown. He mostly just exists as a wrench to constantly throw in Shiv and Tom's relationship, and for that role I think he works fine, kinda like Rhea in season 2. The other really good stuff is the usual Tom and Greg shenanigans, this time with them going out for a scrumptious dinner and then hitting the town. I love watching their friendship blossom. They're the most iconic duo in the show for a reason. Some of my favourite moments between them are in this episode.
Look, here's the thing about being rich, okay? It's fucking great.
I also like seeing Tom on Team Kendall, giving him the heads up about Ewan being in town.
I can't reveal my sources. But it's Greg.
Makes me long for what a team up between them in season 3 could have been. So yeah, just a fantastic episode that really got me hooked on this show. When I first saw this episode, I thought there's no way the show could possibly get better, and yet we still have 4 more episodes to go. So let's continue on, shall we? Number 4. Connor's Wedding. This is it. The episode that shocked everyone, and yet was an inevitability from day one. This is the highest rated Succession episode on IMDb. In fact, it held a perfect 10 for a good week or so before dropping down to a 9.9, which meant for a brief period it was one of 2 episodes with that rating, shared only by Breaking Bad's Ozymandias. And if you ask me, I think it's 100% deserving of that accomplishment. This isn't my number 1 episode, but if I had to call out one as the crowning achievement of Succession, it has to be Connor's wedding. Going into season 4, it wasn't exactly a crazy prediction to say that Logan would die at some point before the finale, but it's the way this episode handles such a pivotal moment that makes it the standout that it is. We don't get to see Logan keel over and die in a toilet. Instead, we experience it through the eyes of our main characters, who don't get to see any of it. I'm having trouble figuring out how to approach this because it really is an incredible episode beginning to end. But the best of the best is the extended sequence starting from the moment Roman gets a call from Tom, where the siblings have to reckon with the fact that their father is dying or maybe even already dead. Roman is first to attempt to say something to Logan, but gives up pretty quick, much like he does at the funeral. Kendall's thoughts are kinda halfway between "you're my dad and I don't want you to die" and "you ruined my life and I can't forgive you." It's some depressing shit to watch, considering he knows this is maybe his last chance to say something, and still can't reconcile how messed up their relationship was. The real heartbreaker is once Shiv gets on the phone, where Sarah Snook gives yet another powerhouse performance. And this is the one time the show actually got me to feel emotional, which is incredible considering Logan is the worst and Shiv ain't much better. But seeing her reduced to a blubbering mess is pretty devastating. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is Connor's reaction, once they finally remember to tell him.
They think he's dead.
Well, is he? They're doing heart compressions.
Oh, man. He never even liked me.
Equally depressing for totally different reasons. The best part about all this is how incredibly realistically this event is portrayed. No one gets a touching farewell, Logan doesn't get to make peace with anyone before he goes, it's just a phone call from a plane that may as well be on the other side of the world. Apparently this whole scene was filmed in one ultra long take, but what we see in the finished version cuts between the sibs on the boat and Tom on the plane, which I think was the right decision. I would love to see a version set entirely on the boat, in fact that could be the greatest bottle episode ever, but the brief glimpses we get of Logan's body plus Tom's reactions add a lot to the scene. The part afterwards with everyone going crazy trying to figure out their next move is also amazing, and it was especially satisfying to see Kendall lock in and get Shiv and Rome in order. Once he has a moment to himself to accept that Logan is gone, he's all in on making sure they handle the fallout in the best way possible. And it's little moments like these that make me believe he always had the impulse necessary to lead Waystar. He's got a lot of rough edges, but at his core, he's got the killer instinct that his father had, minus some of the worst Loganisms. Jeremy Strong does spectacular work as usual throughout the episode, my favourite bit being when he has to go out into the crowd to find Shiv. The look on his face just says it all. Shiv's statement to the press is short and sad, and the last moment where the 3 siblings hug is beautiful stuff. Apparently that was unscripted. I also appreciate the detail of Roman being the only one who goes to see the body, since he was always the most inclined towards Logan. Even Tom gets an emotional moment when he calls Greg to deliver the news. Tom ain't family like the rest of them, but he did sell out his wife to join the Logan Hive, and he was probably closer with him at this point than any of the siblings. And on the other side of the spectrum is the Waystar team's reactions, which are immediately to put together a plan on what to tell the media and what it means for the stock price and all that nonsense. The highlight is Kerry's reaction, which is utterly bizarre. I don't think I have much else to say, honestly. It's an amazing episode, but if you've seen it, you already know that. For many, this is Succession's peak, and understandably so, but I've still got a few more episodes that I think are a bit better. Number 3. With Open Eyes. The final episode of Succession was everything I hoped it would be and more. As soon as I saw it, I knew it was a perfect ending, and the decision to structure it around an impending boardroom vote, much like my beloved Which Side Are You On, was a spectacular choice. It's kinda like a combo of that episode and the season 3 finale, where we once again see the siblings rally together for a final showdown, only to yet again fall apart at the last moment. I'm gonna start by discussing each main character's endings, starting with Rome because he's the least interesting. The last scene is him in a bar by himself sipping a martini like Jerry. The main takeaway here is that Roman basically has nobody. Sure, he's more sociable than Kendall, but at least Kendall is friends with Stewie. Roman alienated Jerry, his dad is dead, Tabitha is nowhere to be seen. It seems like he's going to be living a very lonely life. But at the same time, he's got a slight grin on his face because at least he knows who he is. Like he says in the meeting, he and his dim-witted siblings are all bullshit, so hopefully now he can move on and become a serious person. Shiv isn't faring much better, in fact she's probably doing worse. After turning on Kendall and electing Tom CEO, she's now stuck in a loveless marriage with a kid on the way, who I'm sure will grow up to have all the same parental problems as she did. She technically could leave Tom and be a single mum, or find some other doormat to marry, but I think she's too attached to the power and influence of Waystar, even if it means living it vicariously through Tom. I should probably talk about why Shiv chose to betray Kendall at the end, and I think it mostly comes down to her being unable to live with the thought of him sitting the Waystar throne. I have a good feeling that as soon as Ken put his feet up on that desk, it was all over. Not to mention Roman and Kendall cucking around over business decisions for most of the season once they became co-CEOs. There's quite a bit of room for interpretation with all this, but that's just what I think. Meanwhile, Tom gets the biggest victory out of anyone, sneaking into the Waystar CEO position at the last moment, thanks to a good interview with Matsson. I had a pretty good feeling going into the season that none of the Roys were going to get the throne in the end, and it's not like Greg or Jess are going to become CEO, so it makes the most sense for Tom to be the winner. We know that Tom is fine with copping shit from people above him, and now he only has Matsson to answer to, so I'm sure his tenure as CEO will be long and fruitful. And most importantly of all, he gets to keep Greg under his thumb, to make sure his Sporus can continue heading towards the bottom of the top. Also love seeing him immediately deciding to kill off Frank, Carl, and Hugo, while keeping on the women who get shit done. All he needs to do is rehire Jess and he'll be set. Connor also comes out pretty much unscathed. In fact, you could say he won more than anyone else. He's the owner of Logan's apartment, he gets to keep all his heirlooms, and he's got Willa who doesn't hate him at least. It's also true that his relationship with her probably won't be all that exciting, but as a guy who doesn't need love, I'm sure he'll manage. I've beaten around the bush enough, so let's talk about my number one boy, Kendall. So this episode sees him fumble at the goal line once again, possibly his biggest fail ever. Going into this episode, I saw only two possibilities for Kendall. Either he fails as usual and kills himself, or he becomes CEO, but at the cost of losing his family and identity, fully transforming into Logan 2.0. I think what we got is a great ending for him and very in character, but I reckon the other option would have been just as good for different reasons. The main point of discussion is his last moments, where he's looking off into the sunset. On first watch, my immediate reaction was mild disappointment, since we've seen the sad, aimless walk scene of him countless times, and I wished we had some kind of finality, perhaps him flinging himself off the railing. A part of me still thinks this, but I think the choice to leave his future ambiguous was the right one. Off this last scene, Kendall could go a number of different ways. He could be dead in the next 24 hours via drug binge, he could wallow in self-misery forever, or if we want to get a bit more hopeful, he could finally put this era of his life behind him and rebuild. He could make amends with Rava and focus on being a dad, and use his $2 billion to make a positive difference. I can definitely see him and Roman improving their relationship too, but I think the betrayal from Shiv will be something they can't ever come back from. The sunset is the key question. We could be witnessing the dawn of a new era in Kendall's life, or this could be the sunset on his life as we know it. It's up to him to decide. Enough yapping about a fictional character's mental state, there's still so much going on in this finale. It's feature length and still dense as hell, with a new development in basically every scene. One of my favourite scenes is Tom and Greg's epic fight in the bathroom, and I love this moment when Greg claps back and manages to make himself look menacing, and then you remember, oh yeah, this dude is really damn tall. Also gotta mention the meal fit for a king scene where the siblings are horsing around like actual siblings, and it was in this moment that I knew this trio was doomed to fail. They may have got me once, but this show wasn't gonna fool me again. Let's end on the big climax, the meeting. Once again, the score does an incredible job at hyping us up for the big vote. Nicholas Britell really outdid himself with this one. The scene where Kendall loses it and Shiv starts unraveling is some of Jeremy Strong's best work, and I was so glad Shiv brought up the guy he killed, because I knew we couldn't end the show without finally paying that off. Once Kendall starts yapping about how he made the whole thing up, I was just kinda staring at the screen dumbfounded, because I guess a small part of me thought he might finally win for once. Just an amazing scene all around. I think I've said everything I can on this one. The finale was really everything I could have asked for, and I'd put it right up there with The Iron Throne as one of the great TV endings, of the 5 shows that I've seen anyway. Number 2. Safe Room. Now, I don't know what the consensus on the best episodes of this show are, but I have a feeling not many people are putting Safe Room in their top 3. But here we are, and it comes down to one thing. Succession, in my opinion at least, is equal parts drama and comedy, An episode like Connor's Wedding goes all in on the drama and is spectacular as a result. But on the other side of a coin, we have Safe Room, which instead chooses to go all in on the comedy, and it ends up being the funniest episode of the entire series. Whether you think that's worth putting it so high on the list is up to you, but for me, I've always considered the comedy the strongest aspect of the show, so here we are. When I think of Succession, I think of this episode in particular, so let's run through all the iconic bits. Let's start with everything Tom's up to, because he's undoubtedly the highlight of the episode. The scene where he has to interview Mark Ravenhead the Nazi is perhaps the funniest in the show, with every line being instantly iconic.
Have you ever read Mein Kampf? Yeah, a couple times, I guess. Couple times? Are there Easter eggs in there you didn't get the first time?
Benny's locked in the not-so-safe room with Greg for the rest of the episode, and once again, every bit of dialogue is hilarious. Greg in particular has some standout moments.
And a person can fit through there. A person can definitely fit through that window. A small person, an attack child.
Greg and Tom's dynamic is at its peak in this early era of season 2, and this episode is the best example of it. Completely unrelated to the whole building lockdown plot is Roman in management training, which is a plotline I always forget about until I rewatch the show. Most of the funny stuff comes from his dynamic with this guy Brian, played by that actor who's in everything. I really wish they brought this guy back somehow in a later season. Perhaps he could have made a play for Waystar CEO when Mattson was taking over. The other unrelated bit is another of my favorites, that being Connor and Willa attending the funeral of Mo. Connor's eulogy is comedy gold, and it's thanks to Willa being a bit more crafty than I think anyone expected, making sure he can't get cancelled from his association with Lester.
Hey baby, how about this for the eulogy?
Ooh.
Lester touched all of us.
I don't think you should do your speech.
I like the dynamic of Shiv being brought in to start her covert training and Kendall being at odds with her. She pretty quickly notices that him and Logan have something going on, and this scene where she confronts him about it is fantastic. This rare bit of warmth between the two of them comes out of nowhere, and has some quality acting from both Sarah and Jeremy, although I do have to point out that Kendall asks that Shiv look out for him, and then she seems to immediately forget about this for the rest of the season. To be fair to her though, there was a lot of shit going on, and maybe Kendall just got lost in the shuffle. The end of the episode with him finding the anti-suicide walls, installed after that convenient employee suicide, is pretty powerful. Logan's got Kendall firmly under his thumb, and not even death is an option of escape. Number 1. America Decides. So I've talked about episodes that excel in the drama, and those that favour the comedy. But Succession is really a dramedy, and most episodes are a combo of both elements. And for my money, no episode does this better than the election in season 4. This episode is everything I love about the show done to such a high level that it had to end up as my number 1. All the character drama going on is deliciously good, and on top of that, it's constantly hilarious. Tom has to deal with the most chaotic newsroom ever and is constantly running around, while Greg uselessly tries to manage the siblings, since he's demoted to Greg status.
I want you Gregging for me. You're busted back down to Greg tonight.
No.
Yeah, tonight my digestive system is basically part of the Constitution, okay?
And there's a breakneck pace to the whole thing that gives the episode a constant momentum as it barrels toward the end of election night. All the best stuff comes from the three siblings arguing about what to do as the votes pour in. Roman's all in on doing anything he can to get Mencken elected, and as a result, he's maybe at his most unlikable, while Shiv is trying to be a beacon for democracy, and Kendall stuck in the middle. The two of them tugging Kendall back and forth between the light and dark side is already great drama, but on top of that is Shiv's alliance with Mattson, adding a whole nother layer on top of the whole thing. My favourite scenes are this one where Kendall opens up to Shiv about him being a bad father and the poison dripping through, and then afterwards when he realises that she's been playing him the whole time, and her subsequent meltdown as Kendall gives in to Roman's bullshit.
Really?
She didn't speak tonight. And she's in with Mattson.
Sorry, what? No.
I fucking asked you some real questions, Shiv.
This one bit behind the glass with Ken finding out about Shiv's betrayal is an incredible moment, with both Sarah and Jeremy once again giving standout performances. This episode is so chaotic that it basically feels like one really long scene, which absolutely works in its favour. Interspersed with all the spicy political drama are great bits with Tom and Greg and Elliot from Breaking Bad, and I really love this snarky Tom who's still pissed at Shiv after their blowout argument in the last episode.
Just bullshit.
You're
bullshit.
It's not bullshit.
Full of fucking bullshit.
Shiv?
What?
You sound a little unhinged.
You fucking watch it, Tom. We do know.
Okay.
When she tells him about her pregnancy, he doesn't even believe her, which shows just how much their relationship's eroded. Once the election is called for Mencken, things start to get pretty depressing, and I love this part where Jess is trying to stop Greg from delivering the news. An incredibly exciting episode overall. It really made me feel for Kendall and Shiv even though they're spineless losers, and it made me hate Roman more than ever. It strikes that balance between gripping drama and wacky shenanigans perfectly, and for that I'm officially calling it for America Decides as the best Succession episode. At long last, that's my ranking of every Succession episode. This one took a lot of deliberating, but I feel pretty good about my picks, especially the top 10. The quality of the show is unreal, and it's been a blast to rewatch. My ranking of the seasons is 2 at the top, followed very closely by Season 4, and then 1 and 3. Season 4 has some insanely good episodes, but I think as an overall package, it doesn't get better than Season 2, where I consider many of the characters to be at their peak. I want to apologize for how ridiculously long the wait for this video was. I went into this one wanting to make it my best ranking ever, and as a result, it took me a lot longer to properly articulate my thoughts on all of it. Plus, I get distracted a bit too easily. Shoutouts to Quinn the GM, Beat Rice, and Slipmaker who took the time out of their days to add their thoughts, so be sure to check out all of their channels. As for what's next, I'm gonna roll right into my next ranking video, which should be a much quicker one to make. I hope you'll join me for that whenever it happens.